like to personally thank Leo Bogdan for his service for the past 9 years on the commission. This is his last meeting. Thank you, personally, thank you. And I'm sure commission members will thank you for your service. You were a bright spot on the commission. You were thorough. You read your homework for each commission meeting. And I, as chair, certainly appreciated that. Also, we've got 2 new members that you met virtually, I believe, the last meeting, Eric and Ray. Eric is from Essex and Ray is from Westport.
I live in Topsfield.
Just 30 seconds.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be involved, and I look forward to kind of contributing as best I can, learning a lot in these first few meetings, and really just doing my best.
Thank you,
I appreciate you having me.
Eric?
Yeah, I'm also very happy to be here. It's an honor for me to try and make a contribution to the fisheries and whatever. Hope I can.
Thank you, Eric. And we're only lacking 1 member today, and that's Shelley Evanston. She's over on the vineyard. As we all know, Cape Cod and the vineyard, Nantucket, there's issues with getting to and from those areas this time of the year. So she will be zooming in, or
She will be watching the meeting, but it's not a hybrid meeting. But she wanted to pose a question to the group, and she could communicate to one of you all. Repeat her question. There aren't any action items today, so I think we're safe.
Thank you. Leo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing me. So we're down still 1 member. Someone to take my position. So could we get a little update on that later on?
I have the director to my right and the commissioner to my left.
Well, Khalil, of course, we need to fill your seat, so that's the intention. We don't have any candidate at this time per se. We have candidates that are interested. We don't, it's still going through the process. So.
And as we all know, it's a lengthy process between security checks, state police and whatnot.
Yeah, I understand. I was just wondering where we're in the process.
Okay, moving along. Review of the August 25 business meeting agenda. Everybody's in favor, so we can move right along from there, or does anybody see anything on the agenda? Bill Doyle.
Abstain from the.
You're abstaining, thank you. So it's accepted. Okay. Jared, review and approval of the July draft business meeting minutes.
You're okay for the wrong one.
I'll need, yeah.
I don't have my glasses on yet.
Have an extra coffee. Yeah, so we're gonna need a motion on this, folks. Are there any edits to the July meeting? Jared sent it out in the packet.
Motion approved.
Second by, all right, Suki Sawyer and Bill Amru seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Agency updates. Captain Chapin.
Good morning, everybody. Mr. Chairman. Colonel John Monahan arrived in July, quickly assimilating MEP and the EA. He is a native of Cape Cod, spent most of his law enforcement with New Hampshire state and municipal agencies, leading the towns of Franconia and Moulton Borough as a chief. He does have training in natural resource management. And again, he is a native of Cape Cod. He was able to get out and do the Meet the Fleet a couple weeks ago. Today he wasn't able to make today's meeting, but hopefully we get him here in September. But it's great having a full colonel in, that full-time colonel. Our op tempo in natural resource enforcement is always balanced by our commitment to DCR facilities, security through the summer, which remain an important MEP mission priority in the foreseeable future. We're currently initiating the hiring of 7 additional officers. We got approval for that. That just started, which should increase our personnel in the field offices by next summer. Typically takes 6 months to a year, 6 months of training, and then they get out in the field and do their field training. But they at least get their boots on the ground, hopefully by next summer for that. For enforcement, I know we brought this up before, but we had a good case out of Westport, multiple size and limit violations of sea bass, tautog, scup, dogfish, and fluke from vessel landing in Westport. The officers chose to charge civilly. These were residents of Delaware. Already 4 out of 5 have already paid the fines in excess of 40,000. So that has turned out well. On the shark fishery, we had a lot of social media reports of sand tiger and great white shark landings from Nantucket. Location was unable to be verified by the authorities, and there's strong reactions from the public on the social media or against the sites kind of quieted it down. We've had a number of patrols in the Outer Cape, Lower Cape for the great white for at all hours of the night, and so far haven't come up with anything. So that seems to be quieter. We do have an increase of blue crab this time of year. We always get a lot of recreational blue crab from Wareham all the way down to Dartmouth. A lot of over the limit issues there. EPOs continue to monitor and enforce, and that's all we have right now. Anything for me?
Thank you. Any questions for enforcement? Susie?
Thanks, Ray. What was the general feeling of how everything went in P-Town this past winter with the, ragged landing lobsters? Think there was more issues, less issues than in years past, or more enforcement this year, or?
I think it was pretty good. I mean, we did. Thankfully, we have an officer out there, and Officer Hopwood, and she spent a lot of time out there. So I think it went pretty good. We did get a case out there, the dragger case. I think that's been brought up here a couple times. So that was good. That was, crossing. They were in different LMAs, fishing in LMA 1 with LMA 3. So I think that, it's hard for me to go back to the year before because I just came into the coast last year. So I'm not sure relative to previous years, but we've got as many people out there as possible looking at times. And I think we're doing pretty good out there.
I didn't hear the complaints, lobstermen out there like I have in the past. It's just there's more enforcement taking place out there.
Yeah, like I said, it's nice. It's so tough sometimes, right out there in P-Town, unless we have an officer kind of assigned, but we have an officer that spends a lot of time out there. So she's been good at spending a lot of time there. Plus the sergeant just came up. So we've kind of loaded that, we call it the 6th region for us. And we've got more people there than we've had in the past. So that's been good.
Thanks.
Bill Amaral.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to interject one little comment on this particular topic. Because it does get quite a bit of conversation at the table, the enforcement issue in Provincetown. I want everybody to know that there are a lot of good fishermen that land legally on trawlers up in Provincetown and other ports on the Cape, and that there have been some issues, and the problems have been partly solved by self-patrolling. The individual fishermen don't want this kind of a reputation. They want to continue to access lobsters legally the way they have been. And if there's an improvement, it's partly because of the fleet itself deciding that they're not going to tolerate it. And I just want that to be clear to everybody that may be hearing nothing but negative reports from Provincetown and other ports.
No, and again, like I said, I just came to the coast again last summer or last fall. So last winter was my first time in a few years that I was looking at it, and we did a lot of checks and lots of compliance.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Bill.
Anything else?
Anything else for Captain Chapin? Thank you, Captain. It's good to have you on board. Once again, no name tags, so everybody, because you're incognito, I know. It's like a real.
I'll get an extra big one for you.
Wait, you haven't, well, you have none. You've never had anything at ASMFC, and I'm supposed to know you, and you're walking around with your sidearm hidden, and so we have some laughs, you and I. Thank you for attending and filling in for, I guess, Lieutenant Bass, or maybe future meetings you'll be here and whatever.
Yeah, we got a round robin when we can make it, and I'd like to be here too. So,
Well, thank you. Very
Matt
much.
and I come together, so that's nice too.
Thank you much.
You can bail me out when I'm have a question I can't answer.
Well, I think it's time to turn the floor over to Commissioner Tom O'Shea. Good morning,
Good
Commissioner.
morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd also like to welcome Ray and Eric. It's great to have you on the commission, and I think you bring some good perspectives relative to our recreational fisheries. And I know that we needed to replace both people on the marine rec development panel. So I think, it's going to be great to have a compliment that we could do that. especially with Khalil leaving, and then we lost Mike, who also filled that role too. So great to have you both. Just wanted to say that. I did meet the Colonel and had a good discussion with the Colonel, and I made it very clear that if there's an area to increase capacity, that it's on the coastal side for sure. And I talked about the letter that the commission sent to the previous colonels, I think both Santos and Mason. And then so I said that I'd forward that letter to the Colonel and told him that, yeah, we really need increased support, and whatever I can do as commissioner to help when the hiring freeze is lifted to fill the much needed positions in MEP, I would advocate for that because they do, and I think we all agree. And I encouraged him to meet the commission, to come when he could, to meet Dan, and to get to know what we all do here. He actually didn't know that DMF was under the Department of Fish and Game, because not people aren't always clear of that. I think in New Hampshire they're separate, maybe, I don't know, but anyway, we're good there, and I think the Colonel's going to be great advocate for the MEP, and it brings a lot of experience. And he's from the Cape too.
He is. He grew up in the Cape. I think he graduated from Nauset High.
Yeah, so he's a Massachusetts guy. Few things that have come across DMF and then my desk recently, and I just want to first point out that the DMF team did a great job. There was a lot of internal questions about the closures for Duxbury Bay and Pleasant Bay relative to oyster Vibrio cases, and I just want to point out that Bob Glenn and Chrissy Pettipass and Matt Camisa in particular and others did a great job developing the reasoning and the approach to a precautionary closure in Duxbury Bay, even though it hadn't been triggered yet. I think it was the smart thing to do, and they really laid out the case as to why we needed to do that to prevent any further cases, and really ultimately to prevent further impact to the industry, because if it triggered any additional cases, then we'd have to probably shut down in a 14-day closure and even do a recall if it went with another couple more cases. So the administration wanted to know why, because they don't want to have an impact to the industry, but they also, just want to know, why did we do that precautionary? We went through that. They did a great job. Pleasant Bay had a precautionary closure. It already hit that trigger point. But anyway, I just want to thank the DMF team, because they always, rise to the occasion to do that extra work. So that was helpful. And hopefully with the cooler weather, Vibrio cases will go down, because that stuff, it's dangerous. Also, just wanted you to know that Town of Ipswich has asked me to attend, along with DMF, a town meeting in September to talk about a follow-up to the meeting we had with town officials and state legislators on our meeting with the FDA. And Dan, I won't get into it in too much detail. You can if you want, but it continues to go on where I think, people are still not sure that, these closures aren't something that we can really address. We've gone as far as we can in terms of minimizing the impact of the closures from the wastewater treatment plant outfall relative to the National Shellfish Sanitation Program and the ordinance that we have to follow for interstate shellfish commerce. So I feel like DMF has gone as far as they can. And again, that closure is precautionary for contaminants that the wastewater treatment plants don't actually filter out, like heavy metals or PFAS. So we're back at that. I think that the harvesters maybe haven't heard the whole situation or expecting that more can be done. So I think this meeting is to, again, address those questions about what has been done thus far, what can we do with the FDA, and what are the options. But we're really seeing at this time that because of the cost of testing and any other type of approach to minimize the closure further would be either costly or not possible, given you have to have 50 states as part of it, right? The NSSP essentially vote on any changes to standards for dilution rates. It's a very complicated but important point. So I'm just raising it because we're going to be going to other communities. We did this in New Bedford. We're going to be talking to Ipswich again. But it's taken a fair amount of time. I have to say, since I've been commissioner, shellfish might rank up there as one of my #1 challenges. And then, so, and there are others, but that one, I just think we just need to be aware that that's still out there. I'm gonna pivot, just to let you all know that I was invited by the Secretary in the state of California, Natural Resources Secretary, to come and speak on a keynote panel at their California 30 by 30 summit. They had an executive order for biodiversity goals for 2030 back in 2020. Governor Newsom put that executive order out. 5 years later, they built a huge grassroots and organizational movement for biodiversity, both coastal and marine as well as inland. And they invited me to come up and speak about what Massachusetts will be doing. And today we will have an announcement on the Cape. The governor will announce the biodiversity goals and report and plan, which you were all invited to, I believe, to attend. And I know, Chair, you're going to be there as well. But DMF team had done a great job helping us develop the marine side of the report. I think they showed real leadership there. And this is just the beginning. These are goals. These are ambitious targets for the next 25 years. But California was looking to us to see what we're doing, and I think they're excited. It was a great opportunity for me. I went with the climate chief from Massachusetts, Melissa Hoffer. She was there at the conference, as well as Assistant Commissioner Jen Ryan in my department. So I thought we had a good presence, and we realized there were a lot of subnational leadership on this. Province of Quebec is doing a lot with this, and other subnational states and so forth. But really, I'd say California's out front, and we're going to be there too. But I think it would be important at some point to have a presentation to the commission about what does this mean on the marine side, what was in the report, and just to have a chance for the commission to just hear about it and talk about it.
Jared, can we get that on an upcoming agenda?
Absolutely. I'll work with the
Thank-
commissioner and his folks to see what the next meeting works.
Thank you. There you go, Tom.
That's great. So, I mean, I will just wrap by saying that Governor Healy's, announcement of this, having a governor elevate our mission, what we do, is once in a career kind of situation. It's, in my career, I hadn't seen a governor come out and elevate our mission like that. And with that, comes a commitment for funding to reach these goals, one of which is I got $1.5 million for marine habitat restoration and the development of maybe a marine habitat center. And Bob Glenn and the team know all about it, and Dan. So, and the more I can begin to build the case for more funding to DMF, I will do that. So that's what this stuff, it takes time, but, I think we're on a good path. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
I believe Chris McGuire will be attending that meeting today. Well,
Thank you, Chris.
questions to the commissioner? Oh, you get a pass today, Don.
It's easy.
Easy, huh? Easy peasy. Director McKiernan, you're up.
Sure, let me just kind of follow up on some of Tom's comments. The model ordinance that requires us to close buffer zones around sewage treatment plant outfall is actually a 10-year-old standard that was enacted by the conference, an interstate shellfish sanitation conference in 2015. It took a couple of years for it to show up in writing. Then it took us a few years to deal with it. Then it was COVID. So we're really, so a lot of folks, I think, who are affected by these are saying, why do you have to do this? Nobody's getting sick, but it's an evolving standard that is not new, but it's new as we get to these wastewater treatment plants. In order to accomplish the closed area off of Ipswich, we had to hire the SMAST oceanographic modelers to describe the flow and the dilution rates around that treatment plant, as we've done in Plymouth and as we've done in New Bedford and the North River and Situate. So it is, as Tom says, very challenging, very, very challenging. Regarding the MEP, yes, we'll try to get the colonel on the agenda to come in, and I think at that time maybe the commission would like to maybe repeat that, a letter of support, which we've done in the past to, for enhanced funding for the environmental piece. So
Every year, Dan,
yeah,
right, Jerry? Every year.
you know, I also really pleased, we've got Eric and Ray here as well. And thanks to Tom for getting those appointments made. And I'm based on my observations, I don't think it will take that long to get your seat filled, because it's the fact that we were able to get these 2 seats filled, and I think in a relatively short amount of time. Even though Mike left a long time ago, there were other people in the mix that were unable to fulfill the seat. But once there was candidates chosen by the governor, it was quick. And of course, it is a governor's appointment. It's not something that necessarily we have, that I have at DMF a whole lot of influence in. Meet the Fleet was a fantastic event. Unfortunately, I was at ASMFC, I missed it, but Story, Jared and Bradley were able to attend Shelley's event, and I know Shelley's listening in. I think, Jared, you call it the best public facing event of the year.
It's the best one we did.
Yeah, there's something about the Vineyarders that they're really happy when you show up. And even when they disagree with you, they're polite about it. So anyway, great event. And it's always the first Thursday of August, which is also unless August 1st is a Thursday, ASMFC kind of takes us away because they're meeting in the same time slot. But really glad the staff was able to get out there. There's a whole bunch of lawsuits going on. I was going to talk about them, but I'm just going to list them. There's on the bean notching issues. There's a federal suit. There's a state suit on striped bass. There's a suit, and both of those, by the way, are against ASMFC and DMF. There's a striped bass suit against the world. There's some plaintiffs down in Maryland that are suing ASMFC, and everyone in the ASMFC, every state in the ASMFC, every jurisdiction. There's a tracker lawsuit in Maine. This is really interesting. I went to the appeals court, and that looks positive for the state of Maine to maintain lobster vessel trackers. But anyway, I know, what's that?
So also we're hearing that.
There's also.
Oh, yeah, of course, there's one for area 2. There's a lobsterman who doesn't want to put a tracker on his vessel and has sued us on that issue, as well as some permitting issues. So unfortunately, that I spend a fair amount of time on those issues. We have great legal support from the Attorney General's office, as well as the Department of Fish and Game. So that's it for me. I want to be very brief because I know we have a very busy agenda. We want to get through some really beefy issues here. Anna is going to be talking about the quarter managed species, and I think it's like an annual summary for us, even though the fisheries aren't closed. But this commission approves our tweaking every year of we dial up limits or seasons, and we try to maximize benefits from the fishery, and so you'll get a chance to see how well we're doing in that regard. And then we have a very substantive discussion about striped bass commercial permitting. And we also have the petition from the Pine Barrens Alliance on horseshoe crabs that we would like to have a lengthy discussion over if time permits, and I think it will. So let me stop there. I'll take any questions, but we'll get right into
Questions for the director? Getting the past. Anna? You present.
By the way, there's new audiovisual in the room now. We also have similar improvements up in our Gloucester office. So it's much clearer than the old screens today.
Now you bring it in.
Sorry, Cleo. Yeah, there's a whole speaker system in the ceiling here, microphones, so pretty much everything you said could be picked up just as a.
So we're all on a hot mic right now.
Yes.
Okay. No whispering to your colleagues. Take it outside.
All right, for those of you who don't know me yet, my name's Anna. I'm our acting assistant director and I run our fisheries statistics program. We collect all the commercial landings data for the state from the seafood dealers and the fishermen, as well as the vessel trackers and the lobster fishery. So I'm focused on today on some dealer landings reports as a summary, and I'm presenting a summary of 2024. Last year I did this in April, but we have pretty big agendas for this commission through the spring and summer, so we're doing it now. And then I'll finish with a review of where we stand for 2025 quota managed species. Just to briefly go over how many permits we sell and the level of activity we see. We issue between 7,500 and 8,000 commercial permits per year and close to 2,000 dealer permits. Of those, about a quarter are primary buyers, meaning they buy directly from the fishermen. And we issue about 500 special permits. That includes everything from shellfish propagation and aquaculture to scientific collection, a bunch of other ones that I'm blanking on off the top of my head. On the right, we have just a distribution of the commercial permits. So we sell approximately the same number of shellfish permits, and that's not shellfish endorsements. So you can have a shellfish endorsement on any permit. This is a dedicated shellfish and seaworms permit or a shellfish and rod and reel permit. Non-boat permits, that's rod and reel individual type permits. They're in the thousands range. Lobster permits around 1,000. That includes coastal, offshore, and seasonal. And then all of the rest are kind of lumped together under a boat permit. Yeah. Yeah, ask questions during this.
What is meant by boat permit?
Boat permit is like we issue different permits for different size boats. So generally there is a boat listed on the permit or require a boat to be listed on the permit. They often are the mobile gear fleet. There's a good chunk of them that are the striped bass fleet or even the tuna fleet for that matter.
So a single boat can have several permits then?
Several in what we call endorsements.
But not more than one permit.
Yeah.
So lobster permit is sort of the premier permit. It's named in legislation as what you need to go chase lobsters. If you don't have a lobster permit, you have a boat permit.
For 2024, this is the table of all of the species that landed that were worth more than $2 million at X vessel value. X vessel value is the price paid to the fishermen. The value is the sum of all of that across the year. Sea scallop is always our top fishery. It's usually about half or more than half, maybe even 2/3 of our value. And these top 25 species in this year represent over 90 to 95% of the total value landed in Massachusetts. Sea scallop, lobster, and oyster are always the top three. After that, it does change year to year. Bill?
Is there a digit missing on the X vessel value of sea scallops?
There is not.
263
million.
140,955.
Well-
Well, there's something, you're talking about all scallops. not
Whole
meat.
scallops, yes. So everything is converted to whole pounds in this table for that column. And that's just so it's comparable among species. So even oysters is whole pounds there.
Long Bedford's the highest.
Yeah, so even when it's just meats landed, Bill, this program flips it at some conversion to.
But the value is the value paid to the fishermen, so it's the value of what it was sold. It's not converted.
Question on this.
Leo?
Leo,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm assuming, as you have in the past, you have a full list down to the
Yep.
least. Could that be made available to us again?
Yeah, that list can range up to almost 100 species, maybe 50. I don't know. There's a lot and a lot of very small amounts of very many species. Some of those are incorrect. Usually sometimes it's a dealer reporting error. Forget what the one that we saw recently. It was very odd. we saw some spiny lobster, for example, this year.
As for my last hurrah, is
So-
it possible to get that?
Yes,
Get that?
absolutely.
Anna, a question on number 7, goosefish. You mean monkfish?
Yes,
Monkfish.
yes. Last year presented on quota monthly from June through October. This is sort of a summary of what we went over in October, but this is in alphabetical order. This is our quota managed species, what we landed, what our final quota was for the year, and the percent that of landings versus the quota. We were around 100% for almost everything. We did have a larger overage for tautog that we will pay back this year. And that we talked about this in October, but it was due to a abnormally high last week of landings that we couldn't predict. So overall, our landings are dominated by offshore shellfish. This includes sea scallops, surf clams, and ocean quahogs. For the most part, we only focus on sea scallops. Surf clams and ocean quahogs have a very different reporting scheme. I only get those data in April of the following year. I don't really have information about the trends within the year. So I really focus on the scallops, but this number does include both. So for our landings, it's almost 2/3 offshore scallops, and our values this year was about half offshore scallop or offshore shellfish. Lobster clearly is our next most valuable fishery. It's only 5% of the landings by pounds, but it is 22 to 25% of the value. So that gives you some context that it's a high value, high priced species. In our intertidal shellfish has pretty much stayed stable for many years. It's around 5 to 7% of the landings and about 7 to 9% of the value. Everything else kind of fluctuates in the middle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there other invertebrates?
It's whelk crab, welcome crab,
Horseshoe crab?
all crab,
Jonah,
Jonah crab, horseshoe crab, green crab.
Okay. Small piece of the pie.
Overall. One of the most interesting trends that has come out recently is that our landings have been declining significantly over the last couple of years. On the right, you can see the landings for 22, 23, and 24 are continuously declining. And our value in 2024 reached lower than our COVID value for the first time in the last 5 years. Now, this is primarily driven by the scallop fishery. So as you saw in the earlier slides, over half the value is driven by scallops. So the trends are very highly dominated by that fishery. If you go to the next slide, this is without including scallops. So we did still have a reduction in landings, but it's not quite as severe. And the value is now much more in line with the rest of the years. So really it is that reduction in scallop landings and thus the reduction in value on the scallop side that has triggered that decline in 2024.
and I can.
Yeah.
Do you have a graph for permits or effort? to kind of-
I don't have that for this, but we can kind of talk about why the scallop fishery
Yeah.
is declining. And that is a combination of regulatory and effort. So this is the scallop fishery by itself. These figures pretty much mimic those full all species figures. That 2024 decline in particular stands out on the right for the landings. The price has increased a little bit at times, probably compensating for the lower supply. And thus the value hasn't had quite as big of a decline as other years, or as the landings, sorry. And just for reference, click the next slide, I did add 2025, preliminary 2025 on here. So there was a bump in May in scallop activity, and that has now put it above the 2024 trends. as it stands today. And that price also bumped a lot, and so the value increased substantially. In terms of why this. Yeah.
Isn't there a big decline in the amongst multiple people landed in 25, 28% reduction of some type?
That
17 million pounds, I
Yeah,
believe.
it is a substantial regulatory reason. So I don't expect that to change much. I don't expect it to go back up
Yeah.
anytime soon.
And if I could, sea scallops are managed principally by the New England Council and NOAA Fisheries. We have a small sea scallop fishery in state waters, but it doesn't contribute much to these overall
Right.
landings.
Yeah, they're allowed like what, 200 pounds a day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how many vessels you have.
It's not that many.
Yeah.
Comparatively, it gets swamped out by the federal
Right.
landings. Chris?
When you say it's a regulatory decline, it's an
Well,
abundance decline,
Yeah,
right?
it's
I mean,
in
it's not that,
response to
right,
abundance, the regulations are being applied and which are cutting landing.
question.
Well, they lost the entire elephant trunk down in the mid-Atlantic. They were diseased, gray eyes.
I guess my point is, it's not that regulations are reducing harvest, it's there are fewer scallops catch.
Right.
A lobster is a different story. Landings have been remarkably similar for the last 6-7 years. We actually went up very slightly in 2024 over 2023, which was up slightly over 2022. Landing or value went up again in lobster as well. Again, prices went up. So that value increase is driven by those higher prices in this case, and very slightly higher landings. This is with 2025. So again, we're trending very similarly on landings, if not slightly higher. And value is also trending slightly higher and is approaching that 2021 peak. And that 2021 peak was driven by the inflation of that year. Our third most valuable species is oyster. Obviously, there is a very strong COVID impact, which you can see in that green 2020 line. But since then and before, most landings and value have been relatively stable with a slight increase in 2024. 2025, you can click again, is very similar as well. So you can see that we're up a little bit, kind of hard to see on these graphs, but it is very slightly higher, but almost identical to 2024 at this point. Our 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th top species do rotate, but frequently they include some groundfish. This year, or in 2024, it was haddock and redfish. But you can see that there has been a decline in groundfish as well. This is both federal and state. Our state component is not a strong component of our landing, so this is primarily federal as well. But they 22, 23, 24 have been relatively similar in landings, but the price has gone down in a lot of groundfish species, and that is driving a lower price or lower value overall. And then 2025 is actually showing quite a bit lower than even 2024 and 2023. So I'm not entirely sure what is driving this at this point, but it's something that we'll continue to look at as we go forward.
Bill?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not entirely sure. It indicates there may be some theoretical reason why we're seeing these lower prices at a time when everything else is so much more expensive.
I don't know why per se, but there's definitely trends in some of the species. And it also, since groundfish is a complex, it depends on the ratio of the species within that group of landings. So in 2020, for example, we had very high haddock landings, and that drove the high landings and the higher price. But haddock has been a lot lower since then. So there's kind of a relationship between how much of each of the species within the complex and what that does to the value.
I wonder that
But I
as
don't know
well.
what that is.
You know, I understand and I appreciate you trying to answer my question. But one of the things that occurs to the fishing industry is the slow disintegration of our own internal domestic ability to provide fish to the public, and the displacement of that product by imported fish coming from all parts of the world that don't export fish to us. And that be part of the analysis that's done, as well as our own domestic.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of, so we only, at least in our shop, we're only capturing data from that primary purchase. We don't capture data beyond that point.
Maybe.
So
No, it does an annual report.
we haven't released one since 2022.
They used to do an annual, Fisheries of the United States, or
Yeah.
at exports and imports and all of that.
And that takes into account beyond that primary sale.
Yeah. Well, it's just not that there's much that we can do about it at state level, but it would be nice to know if this is something that's happening. And it's not getting, analyzed enough that we might be able to do something about it. And I'm all for free trade, but I do think it's important that we understand if we're not providing the ability to bring the fish to the public, there's something that needs to be looked at.
Bill Doyle.
Just a point of information, the amount of fresh haddock fillets and cod fillets being imported from Iceland and Norway, I've never seen so much. It's just pallet after pallet after pallet. And there's still, the market is still dominated by previously frozen Pacific codfish and Russian haddock.
Mr. Chair, if I could just offer a
I'm sorry, yeah.
little insight to Bill's point is, we had, the Secretary of Energy and Environment, had an invitation to the Minister of Fisheries from Norway and her delegation come in. And they said that, and I think Micah Dean has backed this up, that as you're getting warming of the oceans into the Arctic, it's actually a boon for some of the ground fish up there off of Russia, Norway, and Iceland. So it could be a temporary, abundance that is occurring up there that is fueling that. But anyway, I don't know if anyone else has anything to say on that, but just and they, I guess they do freezing on the boat too, right? So they're able to freeze that fish right away and ship it out.
Yeah, I agree. And, Mr. Chairman, it's absolutely true that we aren't producing the fish that we once did that would enter the marketplace. And there's no question that it's being displaced and moving further to the north. And for us to supply the American public with what it wants for its fish needs, we have to import some of these fish. But I think that we need to understand, though, that these are all interconnected relationships. And that it's not, it always seems to come back to the fact that we're catching more fish than we should be catching. And then we end up with smaller stock divisions, and especially true in New England ground fish. Whereas in fact, it might simply be a result of all these changing conditions and environmental impacts and predator-prey relationships, which exist. So just as a general statement to the public, it's a very, very big and complex system that we're dealing with.
Any other questions on the 2024 overview before I get into what's happening currently? All right, most of you have seen this type of figure before. On the left, I know it's a little small on the projection, but it is our estimated projections of when a fishery may close based on the rate of landings of the previous weeks and what we expect in the future. So, and then on the right, I have a comparison of daily landings over time for the last 5 years, or 5 years, including this year. The red line is the quota for this year. Don't know why it's showing up as a straight line. It's actually supposed to be dashed, but whatever. And so you can see for black sea bass, we're tracking similarly to 2024. To an extent, we started a little slower, but it has picked up a little bit more. So our rate of landings is increasing over previous years. So we may see that this may be a turning point, or it may fall back off. It kind of depends on how the next couple of weeks go before the fall starts for real, and it tends to fall off at that point. Did have a decrease in quota this year, but as you can see, we're pretty much on track for similar timeframes as previous years at this point,
Is that October 8th?
October 5th.
So if you look at those trends, you're seeing some, similar utilization of quota. And so what we do, as you know, in the winter and early spring, we come to you with ideas about how to extend the season, make sure people are making enough money. And we have rules, and the rules that is that Jared, and who is very creative in this regard, looking at these patterns, we have rules where some of these trip limits will automatically go up based on our understanding of whether or not, as you get into the fall, given the decline in effort and the enhanced bad weather, we feel like we can forecast, even a year in advance. If we're here, this is what we need to do. So Jared, on black sea bass, what are the triggers and what are the changing?
We automatically eliminate the closed fishing days on September 15th. I do not believe we have built-in trip limit increases for sea bass. We're generally on target for this species. It's just about providing more access later in the fall, given declining weather. And, we also want to try to keep this fishery open into October, so it coincides with our tautog fishery. Because there, particularly in the rod and reel fishery, there's a lot of bycatch or combined catch of both species. So we try to have those co-occur to the greatest extent possible in the fall. And I think last year we ended up closing tautog on October 10th and sea bass on October 12th. So we achieved that pretty well.
We do have triggers in summer flounder.
Summer flounder many.
All right.
And I think that sea bass quota may be wrong for 2025.
Oh, it's what's on our website, so if that's wrong.
It's 787, but I'll double check.
Okay.
So I added some new stuff in right now, just so you can see a little bit more about the market conditions. So this is the value similarly across the last 5 years. And we're actually trending a little higher. As you saw, it was a little bit lower on landings, but price seems to be slightly higher. And it looks like it was higher in July. August, it's only half the year or half the month being calculated so far. So that's definitely subject to change. One thing about value for sea bass, and this is true for fluke as well, and other species that have market categories, is these prices are all kind of combined across all market categories. So, if it's a year that has a lot of jumbos landed, that price is going to be a little higher because they get a higher value for those fish. But right now, this is just kind of across all sizes combined together. So it's just a general overview.
Yeah. Anecdotally, there were last year was dominated by mediums, which have a much lower price than the large and jumbos. I'm hearing that the size distribution of the catch is trending a bit larger this year. That would be great.
It depends on where you fish it.
Yeah.
It really does. It's extremely variable. But yes, I think they are, generally speaking, a little bit bigger.
I'm correcting myself that our initial starting quota was 787,000 pounds, and we got a preemptive transfer to increase the quota from some other states. So it is right, the number that you have, sorry about that.
Okay.
It includes a quota transfer.
All right, so moving on to fluke. We did have a significant decrease in quota in 2024. We had another decrease in 2025. So we did make some changes to this fishery for 2025. We effectively reduced the period 1 fishery significantly. It only landed around 4%, 4 to 7% of the quota, compared to 25 to 30% in previous years. So that's why that initial part of the year has a much lower trend than previous years. Since then, you can see the rate of landings for fluke is still lower than previous years. It's tracking a little bit more similarly to 2021 than other years right now. Maybe 2023, it's a little bit similar to that as well. It's kind of unclear what's gonna happen from this point forward. Again, a lot of it is weather dependent as we get into the fall. We do have 2 pending triggers, maybe even 3. There, I think I only wrote 2 of the 3 on there because we're not gonna hit one of them. We will likely increase to 800 pounds on September 1st. Assuming more than 20% of the quota remains at that time, which we're only at around 50% right now. So for another 2 weeks, it's going to be difficult to get 30% of those landings in. And then on 10/1, October 1st, if more than 10% remains, it goes to 500 pounds, or if not, it will stay at 800 pounds. 5,000, sorry. But at its current rate, it's still projected to close in November, but we'll see what happens. That will change over time.
We also eliminate the no fishing day on September 1.
Yeah.
Saturdays will be back in the mix.
Yeah.
And had landings been, landings been higher this year, there's a trigger at 75% of the quota used by August 15th. If we reach that, the trip limits get reduced so as to bleed out that quota throughout the remainder of the summer and into September. We did not hit that.
So similarly for value, I do need to look at these numbers to see if the June prices were accurate. Again, all 2025 data is preliminary. We haven't QA/QC'd every line of it yet. So that really high price in June might be true, might be slightly lower, depends on quality of the data. But looking at this, our value is currently up over some previous years, despite the lower landings. So that is reflective of that higher price that we're seeing. And again, same thing, it's across all sizes here. All right, so switching gears to bait horseshoe crab. We had the closure implemented in 2024 and 2025. So the start date of that season, you can see both. It's actually really hard to see 2024 on the graph because 2025 is tracking it almost identically. So we're kind of waiting to see if that late August increase in 2024 doesn't seem to be happening yet, but we'll see how that plays out. And keep an eye on it. We do have another pending trigger here where we'll reduce to 200 pounds if we hit 80% before 9/15. So that might happen. So that one's a wait and see. We'll know more in a couple weeks.
And the purpose of that is to provide continued bycatch allowances for shellfish dredge fishers.
And that's 200 crabs.
200
crabs, sorry.
Per trip,
Yeah.
because these crabs are caught as bycatch.
This is all in count. All the other figures are in pounds, but this one is in number of crabs.
Khalil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there an X vessel value to these?
Yep, next slide.
I got it.
There you go. So we're seeing slightly higher price in July for bait horseshoe crabs and August so far this year. Again, it's very similar to 2024 though. So this is there's pretty much a regime shift in terms of commercial landings here. So the pre-2024 and the post-2024 are diverging rapidly. So we'll kind of need a few more years to see if this continues as this.
Just a commentary. It looks like that June closure is working.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at
Shifted the fishery almost entirely to the mobile gear fleet.
Yeah.
Okay.
There anecdotally, maybe only 1 or 2 hand harvesters that continue to work after that June
I
closure
didn't think about that.
in discrete areas.
Yeah. And there's a little bit of mobile activity prior to the closure.
That's really a May closure. It opens, the 8th of June?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a May closure.
Yeah.
April 7th
April,
to
May.
June 7th, or April 20.
April 15th to
Thank
June
you.
7th.
It's on the previous slide.
There's some multi-year catch
Right.
in the early months, as you'll see, related to primarily shellfish dredge fishing. And then a lull when the closure happens, and then you'll have the noble gear catch start up in mid-June as the fluke fishery begins.
And before you can make any conclusions about the value, it's important to know that that doesn't necessarily mean that the person using a crab in a whelk pot is paying a higher price, because some of the prices paid for those crabs have been by the dealer who's also bleeding them before they go to the market. So that there could be a little bit of an elevated value that's embedded in that. because
Understood.
When they go to sell those crabs, they're getting much less money.
A lot less money.
No, but the fishermen don't have to pay as much
Understood.
for the crabs as what you're seeing on the screen.
Yeah.
A preponderance of our big crab harvest right now is being dually purposed for both biomedical and bait purposes through the Ranch Crab program, which, was our intention several years ago.
Right, so I don't have the quota on here because it's a lot higher than our landings. But this is tracking similarly, if not lower than previous years, but the trend is very similar over time. Don't normally have a lot to say on SCUP, but this is where we stand right now for this summer season, which runs May 1st to September 30th. In terms of value, it actually went up a little bit in July. So that value has ticked up a little bit. It went down in June a little as well, so it's balancing out a little bit, but it's still a little higher than 2023, but again, tracking 2024 fairly well. All right, bluefish. Bluefish is kind of an interesting one. We do often have quota changes throughout the year, so this is where it's at right now, which I believe it's the same as it was last year, and then we transferred quota. So that you see the yellow line that's sort of where the fishery ended that year, so we transferred away the rest of the quota. I don't see it to another state. Yeah, I don't see it ticking up too high this year. Sort of depends on conditions into the fall. Weather dependent, a lot of other things could be in play.
I think they're pretty much non-existent up our way. I mean,
right.
People like this bluefish pyramid coming up this weekend. Where is not even catching? Because one person catching a bluefish like every couple of weeks. I mean, absolutely nothing.
Well, we've got that cold water in
Yeah.
place again, the Labrador Currents. I believe that cold water runs right down in North Carolina again this year. And that's where the fish held up last year, right? The bluefish?
Yep,
Pretty much.
they're doing well in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Fish this year.
And their quota is over 1 million pounds, right?
I think so.
Great.
Regardless, there looks like there is a trend there occurring, and is there any concern by the DMF staff who's responsible for monitoring the bluefish? Is there a concern that seems to be a downturn here?
Nicholas?
This stock is in a rebuilding plan, and I have some slides later, but it's actually projected to be rebuilt this year. So it was declared overfished a couple of years ago. It's in a rebuilding plan, which looks to be on track. So a lot of the landings are going to be related to distribution as opposed to.
Has ASMFC come up with any reasons why the stock got into some trouble?
I mean,
If that's not, maybe that's the wrong word, trouble, but the
Yeah.
population seems to be down.
there was overfishing, and the stock went below its threshold level, so it was declared overfished, but the limits were reduced and it's been rebuilding, and the latest stock assessment says it'll be rebuilt this year.
Overfishing. Okay, so next year with this,
If I could,
It's a positive sign. I don't think that the land availability and not just abundance overall.
And if I could add to Leo, it's the Mid-Atlantic Council manages bluefishes,
Okay.
not ASF.
Well, it's a joint,
As a joint management.
Could you say that the fishing effort is off some with the bluefish?
I think it's lower right now, and participation has gone down, but again, it's likely due to that distribution and just fish are not available to our fishermen at the moment.
Fisheries always been episodic in Massachusetts and based entirely on availability, and fish aren't here. You know, we're not gonna catch our quota.
And that shows in this graph too, like 21, 22, 23 all go up, and then 24 is down. And 25 seems to be following that. So it just seems they did not
Right.
come in.
Thank you, Commissioner. So does it seem to be that the population is down more north, off North Carolina than it is up here?
Yeah.
Based off water temperatures?
it seems like the landings are static. If you go back 5 years, we were getting quota transfers from North Carolina because they weren't
Okay.
using their fish.
Yep.
And I think last year we gave some bluefish to North Carolina, so it really is like a distribution issue.
I've seen, you know, over the last probably 4 seasons, just a steady kind of decline in bluefish in my business on the water, just, you know, last year was better than this year. And we do see like certain areas that hold a lot of fish, but overall it's just kind of taken a slow dive over the last probably 4 years. But it's interesting to hear that maybe more of the population's down south based off.
Anna?
And then here value is starting to go up, but those or the price is a little higher, but the landings are just low enough that it's not compensating, and the value is still pretty low compared to previous years. All right, Menhaden. So we've been very steady with Menhaden actually for this season. We had which I did not write down how many days we actually had at the highest limit. But the last day was June 9th, where it dropped to 25,000 pounds. And since then it's been, you can see it's very steady. Not really any different than previous years. We had a little bit of ups and a little bit less of it was steady last year, but it was at a lower rate. We have, I think, 1-2 additional boats this year. So it's going up at a reasonable, steady pace. We are very close. So this pending trigger on September 1st, and Nicola can talk about other options that we're looking into for this fishery. We have another week or so before we would hit this quota at its current level. Yeah.
So we're looking at either opting into what's called the episodic event set aside, which is 4 to 5 million pounds, 1% of the coastwide quota that the Northeast states can use if they hit their 100% of their quota before September 1st. So that's an option. One of the rules about the episodic event set aside though is that you harvesting from state waters, and right now most of the fish are kind of, the fleet's acting like right around the border between state and federal waters. More of the fish have been in federal waters this year, so if we opt into the set aside, it might not actually, provide access to the fish to the boats that are active. So alternatively, we have a kind of a quota transfer waiting to see kind of what the hurricane does to fish distribution this week, where the landings are. I know Maine is most likely to opt into the episodic event set aside early next week as well. So that would be kind of a shared resource for us with Maine. But we're waiting to kind of see what happens this week and which direction we go there.
Thanks. Most aware that they can't fish in federal waters if you've been into the episode. I heard of that.
We will make sure to have that. That's like the main consideration for the transfer.
All coming from federal waters, there's moments,
Very
size up our.
yeah.
Yeah, they're all fishing in federal waters.
Up off Cape Ann, yeah.
That's where most of the boats are.
Just a couple of lessons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're keeping me updated daily on where the fish are, so most are aware of that issue with the episode.
Because it's been a small amount of fish to people. I think actually they've stopped fishing a little bit because of the size of the fish also.
They're getting a slightly better price this year, so the value is up. Again, it's fairly consistent as well, so that, and that's fairly true through time. So it's very steady increase in value through over time. Okay,
Let's move on.
moving on to the striped bass. The striped bass is the only fishery that we have closed to date. We are currently at 99.8%. So we're pretty psyched that we are spot on this year. Almost all of the landings, if not all of them, are in at this point. So we are pretty confident that we'll be under the 100% by 0.1, 0.2. The fishery was pretty steady this year as well. We had about 15 open days. And the average daily catch rates were around 45,000 pounds per day, which is about 10% higher per day than they were in 2024. Thursday was not added as an open day on August 1st, which is one of the triggers. So we did hit more than 70% before August 1st. It was closer to, I think it was closer to 80, 85% at that point. And in terms of value, like relatively similar to other years. Again, we had a slightly higher price in July than 2024 and into August, but August is really just one fishing day. It was depressed in June, but we knew that was happening. There were, the dealers basically said, don't fish this week in June because the market was saturated. There was a lot of fish available. And so that week had a low price, which drove that really low compared to 2024.
Was it out of state fish that were available on the markets?
Rhode Island.
I don't think so. I think it was just, we had 2 weeks of very, very high landings to start the season and we flooded it. And then they took the week where it was slightly depressed. If you go back one slide, you can see that week. The third week, it's that little step is smaller that time than the first two. And then it goes back to being bigger weeks after that. So we were able to project this one pretty well. We worked really well with the dealers this year to get estimates and knew that we only had about 1 day left. So we were able to close in the middle of a week.
Question for Anna. Leo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 9 years that I've been on the commission, and it's the fourth largest ranking as far as on the X value surf clamps. You very rarely talk about surf clamps.
Yeah.
And
part of
it
that
seems to be a pretty healthy species.
Part of that is because we don't have access to those data very frequently. The federal surf clam fishery is what drives that number too. So it is an entirely run federal program. It's an ITQ.
These are state figures, right?
No, this is all landings in Massachusetts. So federal waters or state waters.
Okay.
It's an ITQ system, so it's a very unique fishery in and of itself. And I don't really have access to the trends.
Maybe because I don't understand now. Could some of those surf clams come from other states?
No, probably not. We do have a small inshore fishery for them, but it's swamped by the bigger.
That's quite a lot. That's $10 million worth.
The trend in surf clams, it's almost exclusively federal, but the trend is used to be a New Jersey-based fishery, and they've lost most of their production. And with ocean warming, it's moved east and north. And so Nantucket Shoals is a super important area now, more so than it was in the past. So
it's interesting.
Yeah, and now we are going to be coming back, going out to public hearing this fall with some regulations about the state waters fishery. And drawing lines, to protect eelgrass and mandatory trackers on the vessels, things like that.
So are these clams tracked on a weekly basis as some of the other species?
Federally,
Federally.
and
So,
like
so,
it's
so,
a
so I'm trying to-
individual quotas for
So
the.
are
federal
those
boat.
surf clams primarily in federal waters?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have only about 6 boats working in state
Wow.
waters and really discrete areas, Provincetown a little bit, down on the South Shore, sometimes around like the Cape and Island, like South Cape and Islands, but it's pretty small scale fishery.
First time we've really even delved into the subject.
So Khalil, I just wanted to give you some additional context about our top 20 list there. So some of that can reflect that a species is increasing, but also can reflect that species that used to have a higher level of prominence have declined in either value or abundance in this case. And
Exactly.
so things that in the last 5 or 6 years have had really high values and landings, including Jonah crabs, which are having issues with marketing because of Monterey Bay red listing, so that their value isn't as high as it was, and other things like channeled whelk, who their value is depressed in Asia right now. So those are dropping down the list, which can buoy some species up. So it's not just that surf clams are
Understood.
marketing, it's that they're
Yeah.
relative importance.
I understand that concept, yeah, supply and demand. Yeah, that's interesting.
It has often been the, number 4 in our state water or in our state landings for many years. Number 5 is the one that changes a lot. I think as early as 23 or 24, Jonah crab was number 5 and now it's 13. So that is an example of that.
That's exactly what you said. That's an interesting concept. You have to realize it's not just numbers, but it's the value that's put on it.
Bill Doyle.
Yes, and what was the geographical spread of the striped bass landings this year?
It was similar to 2024 preliminarily, like looking at dealer data, looking at port of landing. We did have a much stronger North Shore landing than South Shore. I don't have the exact distribution, but yeah.
Question for Anna. Belong.
That was interesting. Thank you so much.
Interstate fishery management update.
Yes, so I have a couple of slides, and the first part of it is really going to be a great follow-up on some of the quota issues that we were just talking about. And so I'm going to cover the specification settings that was done by the Mid-Atlantic Council with the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission last week for those jointly managed species, which is fluke, scup, sea bass, and bluefish. And then also focus on striped bass outcomes from the ASFC August meeting. So first up with bluefish, what we can expect for next year, the bottom line literally on the slide in bold is that the coastwide commercial quota is going up 54% for bluefish. As I was saying earlier, the stock assessment is showing that the stock is successfully rebuilding. It's expected to be rebuilt in 2025. Ahead of the 2028 deadline. And so this has led to actually a doubling of the acceptable biological catch that's recommended by the Statistical and Scientific Committee. What is interesting about this is that the council and commission agreed to apply to the increase because the stock is still rebuilding, because there's uncertainty about how the MRF data are going to change next year, and to provide some stability to the marketplace and just the fishery in general. Some management uncertainty buffers were applied. So even though the acceptable biological catch increased 100%, the coastwide quota increases 54%, and the recreational harvest limit is going up 40%. We are in a 7-year transition period of adjusting the state-by-state allocations. So Massachusetts' bluefish quota for next year is going to go up 63%. So that's about 430,000 pounds. Whether or not we'll use that will really depend on the distribution again, like we've seen this year. And then with that increase in the recreational harvest limit, this is the only species that at this August meeting, the council and commission decide what the recreational limits will be for the stock. So there was right currently we're at 3 fish for private vessels and shore-based anglers, and 5 fish for anglers aboard higher vessels, and that's going to increase to 5 fish for the private and shore-based anglers and 7 fish for the for higher vessel anglers.
Per angler.
Per angler.
Okay.
So we'll have to go to rulemaking to implement that change in Massachusetts. So we'll have a public hearing proposal, a short memo on that at a future memo, and take that to public hearing this winter. For summer flounder, the stock last year was considered overfishing. The next assessment has said we're no longer overfishing, and the biomass is between the threshold and the target level, projected to be increasing. And so there was a 50% increase in the acceptable biological catch. But this was another situation where the council and the commission thought it was wise to apply a buffer to add some more stability to the fishery. If you go back 3 years, there was an assessment that had allowed us to increase our quotas a whole lot. And then in hindsight, the recruitment that led to that projection wasn't quite as good as we thought. And so then the quotas came back down in 2024 and 2025. So rather than repeat that situation, the council and commission applied this uncertainty buffer to try to avoid that kind of seesawing of the quota for quota. And so there isn't an increase, but it's not the maximum that would otherwise have been allowed. So the coastwide commercial quota is going up 45%. Notably, Massachusetts' quota is going to go up 75% though. So we'll have to figure out how to adjust regulations to deal with that. And the difference there is because there's a level of quota, 9.55 million pounds, the commercial fishery. When the quota is set above that amount, all the states get an equal share of the quota as opposed to the historical shares that are based on historical landing. So under that approach, Massachusetts sees more of the quota when the quota is at the level. So we get more of an increase. And then the recreational harvest limit is increasing 30% from the prior year. What that means for the recreational measures, we don't know that until the December council and commission meeting. But it's important to note that an increase in the recreational harvest limit does not always translate to an increase in the regulations. For scup, this is a stock that is over 300% of its target, but it is projected to come down in the future years because year class in the last couple of years has not been as strong. So the acceptable biological catch levels are decreasing. So in terms of our commercial quota, the amounts are coming down 9% and 12% over 2026 and 2027. The recreational harvest limit, however, is actually going to increase a little bit for 2026 and then come down in 2027. That has to do with the difference between commercial and recreational. There has to do with how much we expect the discards to change. And again, the recreational measures for scup will be determined later this year, whether it's an increase or a decrease or status quo. Turning to black sea bass, I am very happy to report that we have an increase in quota for black sea bass. The stock remains to be nearly 300% of its target level. We've had to deal with particularly on the recreational side, reductions in the limits for a number of years. This is the first year that I'm hopeful we'll be in a position to relax the recreational measures a little bit. That won't be determined until later this year though. But the commercial quota, on account of the results from the stock assessment, the commercial quota is going to increase 30% and the recreational harvest will also increase 30%. what was notable about this is that the council's scientific and statistical committee decided not to actually use the projections from the assessment. Because for the past 5-6 years, each assessment has indicated that black sea bass biomass is going to decline. And then we get the next assessment that has said that did not happen. So they felt that it was the best scientific information to not use the projections from the assessment based on that track record, and instead kind of use the terminal year biomass estimate to set the future year quotas. And so that was a decision that was well received by the council and the commission. And so just as I was saying, the recreational measures won't be determined until December, because we go through this process where we compare the recreational harvest limit to what we project harvest will be under the status quo regulations, and then we think again about what the target level, what the biomass is, and that leads you to what the outcome is. But as we've seen with black sea bass and scup recent years, there's been reductions that have been taken kind of slowly in response to this process. And so the same thing may happen on the other side. When you're allowed to increase, it's kind of goes in slowly. And so it's all in the name of fishery stability. And so that's why I'm saying, even though the fluke, RHL, recreational harvest limit, is increasing, it might not translate to you get a really big increase right away. It kind of gets phased in, trying to avoid that whipsaw.
Nicola, in prior years, we would not come to a final determination on limits until early March. Is that still the schedule? Are we looking at?
Yes. So, when the council and commission meet in December, they will decide what the coastwide allowances. Can we liberalize regulations to increase by 10%? Do they have to be status quo? Do we have to reduce the coastwide harvest by 10%, 20%? And then we have to go through the commission process to determine how those are applied, state process.
So we'd likely be looking at a scoping meeting in February to inform emergency regulations for that.
Yeah.
Or commission meeting would be the first week of February.
The commission meeting, or
ASMSC.
right. So it'll probably be that meeting, some decisions about how the regions have to proceed.
Right.
Yeah.
So
we would follow that.
Right.
State scoping meeting, and then probably bring something to this commission in March for emergency rulemaking, so that we can get those rules into place by May 1.
Right.
And so just another brief update on this ongoing draft amendment about recreational sector separation. This is for early in the process of developing this as a council commission amendment, but it's looking at whether or not to manage the for hire mode and the private and shore mode with the recreational fishery in a different way. So the one action that was of importance, I think, that happened in August was that options that would assign, separate allocations, a separate overall catch limit to the different modes was removed. So that the document is still being developed to consider other ways to have different regulations for the modes, but not with an allocation that they would have accountability measures for and really be that much, accountable to. But where, there's likely to be an option that could result in separate measures for the for hire mode, or there could be just some more guidelines and standards for how states go about applying for mode splits in the fishery. And as part of this, in order to consider for hire mode management, there's some looking into kind of state and federal permitting and reporting requirements in the for hire fleet. There could be some minimum standards, let's say, for states permitting and reporting requirements for the for hire fleet in order to offer them different regulations.
Question.
Yep.
So we're talking about mode splits right now.
Yeah.
And is MREC doing a recalibration?
Yeah, so we're expecting that early next year, MREC will release the results of the recalibration survey, the recalibration effort, so we'll have likely going to have different MRF estimates for prior years, which will then have to be incorporated into stock assessments and management. Yeah, but it'll depend on the timeline for each species stock assessment and when those estimates get incorporated into it and eventually change the measures.
But they are addressing them, right? They're addressing them.
Yes.
Recalibration.
Yes.
Thank you.
So moving to ASMFC, there were other, items that happened during the ASMFC meeting week, but I'm just going to focus on striped bass because it leads us into our next topic of what we're planning for commercial measures. We did, the striped bass board did approve draft addendum 3 for public comment. Hearings are going to occur coastwide in September. We are looking at the last week of September to hold Massachusetts' hearings. We're anticipating doing one north of Boston and one south of Boston, in-person meetings for this. But we're still, the schedule for all of that should be probably released in another week or two. And then the ASMFC will take final action on the addendum at the annual meeting, which is in Delaware at the end of October. So I just wanted to cover kind of what's in there still. There were a couple things that were removed. So as the document is, I'm going to go through it in that order. But the first issue is the method of measuring total length. You may recall that Massachusetts adopted a new definition last year that indicated that the tail has to be pinched for of striped bass so that we're all getting a consistent measurement. We're not fanning out the tail, trying to get it to be within the slot or not. So we encouraged ASMFC to adopt that as a coastwide rule. So that's part of this document. The next part is the commercial tagging program. That's renamed in the document, and the option there is to require states to have harvester tagging programs as opposed to giving the states options to have harvester-based or dealer-based tagging programs. So this would be a significant change for us, as we've discussed, to change the harvester tagging. And there's different definitions in the document as to like when the tagging actually has to occur, whether it's immediately upon possession by the harvester or whether it's just before the boat is taken out of the water or the fish are offloaded. But this is something that there's also an ongoing kind of review of the state commercial tagging program. So there could be other outcomes related to commercial tagging in the future as well in terms of state standards and requirements. The third section deals with Maryland's request to change its recreational fishing season in the Chesapeake Bay in a way that is, intended to give some more access without increasing fishery removals. And so that option was added to the document. And there's, an option that would require Maryland to be a little bit more conservative, apply a uncertainty buffer to that. This is an issue that I think within Maryland is pretty hotly debated. So it'll be it's kind of interesting that this very specific, Maryland issue is included in the coastwide document. And then the main section, of course, is on stock rebuilding measures to support reaching our 2029 deadline to rebuild the stock. So we're going into the meeting drafted options for both a 12% and 18% reduction. The 12% reduction is based on achieving the 50% probability of being rebuilt by 2029. 18% that the board had also asked for, what kind of reduction would it require to get to a 60% chance of rebuilding. It turned out that was 18%, and the board decided that just to continue to move forward with the 12% option.
Which is a 50-50 chance.
50-50, right? But I think there's often a misconception, right? And statistics that 50% is like flipping a coin, and this is likely to meet it or not. But in statistics, it's all based on the distribution And so 50% is a very standard goal to be achieving in terms of that.
Yeah,
You pointed out here that there was an option to take all the cut from the rec sector, but that didn't survive in the final draft.
Right.
But isn't it true that in a final vote, the board could vote for something other than 12 across the board? They could give, in fact, if that was gonna be anything except across the board, it would probably reduce the commercial quotas less than the
right.
rec.
Right, it's because the option for the commercial fisheries to reduce the quota, it's easy enough and it's within the range of options for the board in the end to say, we're gonna apply something less than 12% to the commercial fishery, and that has happened in the past. In the last cut, there was a 14% reduction on the recreational fishery and a 7% on the commercial fishery.
And that vote at ASMRC went 6 in favor of a 12% and 4 opposed, right? That's why we're nervous about these states getting support to take less of a reduction in the commercial fishery and then put it onto the recreational. I believe the vote was 6-4.
I don't have the tally, but I mean, in the option that's left in the document, if the commercial fishery that takes less than 12%,
Right.
it doesn't increase the
Oh,
cut
it doesn't.
on the recreational fishery, right?
Okay.
That was the option for 0% commercial cut and a 14% recreational cut. That would
Okay.
have been applying the commercial cut essentially to the recreational fishery.
Right.
So the problem with reducing the commercial cut below 12% is that you're then not overall achieving the 12% reduction that is, projected to be necessary to get to that to rebuilding. And I think at this time, there's, we're all thinking about recruitment and the future of the fishery, and who's responsible for that. So again, there is the option for 12% commercial, 12% recreational. It's a commercial quota cut, and in terms of the commercial fishery, and the way you would be achieving that for the recreational fishery are the size limits or season changes to achieve 12%. On the next slide, it breaks down what that means for the ocean and the Chesapeake fishery. On the ocean, we're currently at that 28 to 31 inch slot limit. So there's not a lot of room to change the size limits to achieve a reduction. So the option is to achieve that 12% reduction through seasonal closures. There is another option that would provide the for hire for a larger slot limit, and in exchange for that, the season closure has to reduce by 13% to account for that. And all anglers, would have the more closed season to account for the fire fleet having that wider slot. And in the Chesapeake Bay, they're currently at a 19 to 24 inch size limit, so a little bit more wiggle room, and so there is an option that they could achieve in Chesapeake Bay. That reduction through changing the size limits rather than season closures. But then there's also an option for a mode split and the option to take the cut through a season closure. So they have one more option. Importantly, season closures are still being talked about in 2 ways. Either a no harvest closure, that's typically what we have, when our black sea bass season ends on September 3rd, you can still go catch and release black sea bass if you want, you just can't harvest it. So we typically use no harvesting closures. There are options for a no targeting closure though. So in addition to not being able to harvest a striped bass, you would not be allowed to target striped bass. And there previously was like 2 calculations of what the no targeting closures would look like. The board did narrow that down to 1 option. So you have the number of days you would have to close in a wave, a 2-month wave, to achieve 12%, either through the no harvest closure or the no target closure. And there's still options for different regional breakdowns of how closures would be applied. There's coastwide, there's Maine through Massachusetts, and then Rhode Island to North Carolina, or you could put Rhode Island into the northern region. I think where Rhode Island is, it depends really what kind of wave you're talking about the closure being applied. So depending on the option that is preferred, I think that may depend where Rhode Island ends up, either in the north or the south region. But
Yeah, I'm just, and maybe I missed this. What was the reasoning for the higher slot limit for for hire versus private and shore?
the for hire fleet has made an argument that, you know, their anglers are out there with the intent to harvest a fish, and it helps them to attract clientele and stay in business, essentially.
Yeah, because when they pay for the charter, they want to take fish.
They want to take fish home.
Yeah.
I just want to mention for the commission, one of the more controversial issues that is going to be debated is this question of no targeting versus no retention. And there are folks at the ASMFC board table who feel that even though no targeting is very difficult to enforce, and I'm sure Jack feels that you can't enforce it very well, the feeling is, well, what was it, the 80-10-10 rule that somebody put forward, that 80% of the angles will do the right thing? And I personally do not support that, because I think it'll start out as 80 and it'll get down to about 8 if there's no enforcement. And so I was working with the delegation from Massachusetts, but I don't support that logic, and I prefer to see a no retention closure. That's something the EPOs can deal with.
Yeah, targeting stuff. I mean, as you get to know the fishery better, you know what the bait they're using, and then you can get a little bit of that, but still, at the end of the day, you can't prove anything.
Tell the judge.
Exactly.
So are we gonna deal with that at the annual meeting? No targeting, or no retention?
Right.
Okay.
And if,
Has that been brought forward? No retention?
yeah,
Yes, that's no harvest.
no harvest.
No harvest.
No, same
Essentially,
thing as no
I use the word retention, but essentially no harvest.
Okay, it's no harvest, right?
Right. Yeah, and well, and the key detail is if you have a no targeting, then you can actually you can reduce the time of the closure. Because if you're allowing catch and release, there's gonna be some incidental mortality related to release.
Right.
But I don't want that to be scammy. I think that's the potential.
Chris?
I was just curious to hear a little about the enforcement side of no targeting. Seems like sort of thought police. Just curious how you guys would even approach that.
Again, you know, somebody can be fishing for ground fish and pick up anything. And they could be targeting, again, if you know the fishery, if you know what the baits are, and you know what the preferred baits are, then you can kind of assume. But again, at the end of the day, you need proof. And there's no way to prove that in court. It just really isn't. I think they could say, well, it's the only bait I had at the time. And so really, even though you might know that they're doing the targeting, it's, you know, proving that in court, and that's what we need to do. It's not just our opinion, it's what's gonna be proven in court. So there's no way that would fly in the courts, you know, with a good defense lawyer anyways. Or a magistrate would just not take it any further either.
I've already heard from several charter guys, recreational guys that, you know, they're like, well, if there's no targeting, I'll just say I'm targeting bluefish.
Right.
And I mean, like you said, how can you prove it?
Yeah.
The guy said, I'll throw on a treble hook. In which case, obviously, you're not allowed to fish for stripers with a treble hook.
Right. Right. I mean, you know, from
Yeah.
an experienced fisherman, or if you know the fishery, you know what they're targeting. But again, it's.
I think people are wise enough to where they can gear it another way, kind of like you're saying.
Yeah, and again, at the end of the day, you can't really prove it. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, totally. It sounds crazy.
Yeah.
Didn't enforcement at ASMFC already agree that they'd rather see no harvest as opposed to no targeting? Because it will be so difficult.
Thing to enforce. The law enforcement committee at the ASFC has an enforceability guidelines document, and no targeting closures rates as the 27th out of 27th. It's like the least enforceable thing for them. So their opinion has been made pretty clear, but you know, it's arguments about other types of arguments other than the enforceability that are causing some people to want to consider no targeting closures. Another thing that was interesting was even though the EEZ has been closed to no targeting for striped bass since 1990, and all that time, law enforcement has never written a ticket that's been upheld unless a fish was actually in possession and harvested though. So it's really not an enforceable. And we know that there's some of that occurred with the EEZ.
Oh, yeah.
Big fish out there.
Yeah, I think
Again,
no targeting
All right.
devastating for Massachusetts. The North Shore, we have nothing else to target. There's no bluefish really around. You mean all the tackle shops, the for hire. Average Joe wants to go out fishing with his kids that's what people do. It's a big part of the economy. Our local economies depend on stripers. And tell people they can't target stripers. That's what there is. I think it's very, very bad. All kinds of adverse feedback. Was just couldn't even consider it.
So at the meeting, there was a push to remove the no targeting options entirely. Massachusetts supported removing those options, and the vote failed 6-8, I think it was. So it was pretty close to keep them in the document what the final decision will be. I'm pretty certain that the northern region states are not supporting no targeting closures.
And we will be having public hearings in September
Right,
on this document.
September we'll have our public hearings on this.
Right, so I would suggest commission members who care about this specific species tune in.
Yeah.
And not only to our public hearings, but New Hampshire, Rhode Island, our sister states, just to hear what the public is saying.
We've got one public hearing tentatively scheduled for September 30th at the Mass Maritime, and we're looking to schedule another one either that week or the week prior, rather, for the North Shore protest.
So just one last slide that I wanted to give you an idea of what closures actually look like potentially for Massachusetts. So this is just the options as an example that include Massachusetts in a entire coastwide region for a closure, or the Maine through Massachusetts regional options. So if we look at the entire ocean, you can achieve a 12% reduction on closing 31 days in wave 3 and 31 days in wave 6. And so the green part there is an example of what the open season would be, assuming it's a no harvest closure. As I said, that's what we're supporting. Like the dates like this are not going to be in the document though. You kind of have to just do the calculations yourself to see what that means. And so these are just some examples of, okay, if you had to close 31 days and wave 3 and wave 6, that means you could close April and you could close December coast-wide, and that achieves 12%.
But your wave, gentlemen,
Yeah.
are 2 months.
Right. And so
Oh, you have it at the bottom. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Or in that same example, you could close, May and November, for example. And then if you get down into the Maine through Mass region, wave 3, May through June, if you close all of May and June to no harvest, you actually don't achieve 12%, it's a 9% reduction. So you have to also take some days from wave 4 in July. So that would be like a July 12th through December 31st season. Technically, you could also have January through April opening. We don't actually have any MRIP recorded harvest of striped bass in those months though. So we want to talk about, what makes the most sense for the season. Just to have it be one period, or do you open it, then close it, then open it again? Wave 4, of course, July and August is the bulk of our striped bass season. So the number of days to get to 12% is less if you want to apply a mid-season closure. So that could look something like January 1st to July 21st. Then you close for the last week of July and all of August, and reopen on September 1st for the rest of the year. Or you could be closed in July and a little bit of August to actually be a wave 4 12% reduction. If you look to wave 5 to implement the closure, that's September and October. Again, you could close all of September and October to a no harvest closure, and you don't get 12%, only 8%. So you have to then close part of August as well. So that would be like a January 1st to August 17th season. So I think maybe the more palatable option that's up here is the wave 3 and wave 5. Split option where it applies 44 days for each of those waves. And so you get something like a June 14th to the September 17th season by taking some of the closure in the front, some of it in the end. The way the plan development team developed that kind of split wave option, they just assigned the same number of days in both of those waves, but there is some flexibility that you could tweak that a little bit. So if you wanted to, open on June 1st, first day of the month, and it would be through September 3rd. If you wanted to open on July 1st, it would be through October 7th. If you wanted to close by September 30th, you would open on June 27th. So, really just to come up with a lot of ideas of how you can do that wave 3, wave 5 split.
I just think if there's gonna be any tweaks, the dates should kind of reflect that biomass shift from the south shore to the north shore. I think I mentioned that before when we spoke about it. But just seeing the population shift from where I am down on the south coast to where they are in the summer primarily. A lot of people have already spoken about how if it's, open in the middle of the summer, we don't really have the fish down our way. So I think like tweaking those dates to kind of reflect that. We stopped seeing harvestable fish in like big numbers probably by mid-June or so. And then, really we're just seeing smaller fish or larger fish in deeper water through that kind of middle part of the summers.
So as a commission member and a charter fisherman, what wave would you be talking about keeping it open for the southern side?
I think tweaking those dates, having wave 3 and wave 5, but maybe tweaking the dates so that wave 4 kind of spreads a little bit into June, perhaps. Those dates overlap kind of like when we see that biomass of fish in our area.
So open.
Open later. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we do have another commission meeting scheduled for this group before the public hearings are even gonna be scheduled, so maybe you wanna think some of this stuff through, we can have a more substantive discussion at the next meeting.
Right. Eric?
Just one comment. I think it's important to have the commercial and recreational either open or close at the same time, but not have one open and one closed. I think there's gonna be particularly have open and rec closed. I think there's a lot of adverse feedback.
Yeah, right. What I'm hearing from the director is we've got another scheduled commission meeting September 18th, at which time Nicola can come back, I'm sure, and present once again, and we can discuss
Yeah,
this
talk about it in more detail.
in more detail. Leo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm assuming the southern states have a charge similar to this, but the waves will be according to their fishery as far as the maximum time or the.
Right, yeah, so the document also has like the Rhode Island through North Carolina region and what type of closures they would have to take, per wave. I just didn't go through the same exercise.
Would the chart look like this, except the waves times would be different?
There's options for each of the waves. The number of days is different because the seasonality of the fisheries is different. So the peak fishery off New Jersey, it's gonna be like wave 2 and 3 and 5 and 6. So wave.
But the numbers in there would be the same for each state.
The numbers for the numbers for Rhode Island through North Carolina would be different based on how much per day.
We're all ending up to the same reduction percentage.
Well, yeah, it averages the same percent reduction. It's not the same number of days being closed.
Right. Understood.
Thank you, Khalil. Any other questions, or can we move on from this subject matter, because we will discuss this in length? Bill?
Just a question, getting away from fluke striped bass and black sea bass, yellowtails, winter flounders, any idea where we are on those?
Because Melanie will provide a federal
September.
update at the next meeting.
September meeting. Thank you, Bill. Are you all right with that?
Oh, yeah, I just don't,
September meeting.
yellowtails, we're one of the biggest commercially landed species. Well, nothing wrong with that.
I'll be melon. Okay, so we will discuss this subject matter at the September 18th meeting. Moving on, the Pine Barren Alliance's
Oh, no,
petition.
we want to talk about the commercial striped bass management considerations. This is a state issue.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
we want to go over that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize. Commercial striped bass management considerations for 2026, but
I'll throw it down here early.
Yeah, no, well, we can spend as much time or as little as you want on this one. We just want to bring you up to date. Nicola mentioned that there's a lot of focus on commercial fishery, and there's an extra focus on Massachusetts commercial fishery because we have a very inflated number of participants or permits sold. So the proposal to require harvester tagging is kind of a dig on us in Rhode Island because we don't have IFQs. And so, it'd be much harder for us to give every harvester their requisite tags. You can do that if you have individual fishing quotas because we have much larger population fish, even technically open access. It would be an administrative nightmare. So anyway, this is an issue that, since I've been director, I've been thinking about, and even before it's been brought to our attention that we really have an incredible number of permits being sold. There's a feeling among the public, especially, in the other states, that we're selling commercial permits for people to be able to take extra fish. Because, you can, if you buy the permit and you take the fish, there's not a rule that says you have to sell them. Now, we all know if it's $100 fish, who in their right mind is not going to sell that fish? Of course you will, right? But it's an optics issue, but it's also it's kind of out of control. And as we dial down this commercial quota, in my view and in the staff's view, it's appropriate to maybe introduce some new concepts to the permitting of striped bass, namely, limited entry, which means we wouldn't issue any new permits after this year. And then the second issue is in the following year, come up with a filter that would reserve participation in the fishery to those who have caught a substantial amount of fish to be determined. And so there's a memo here in your package where we are making some of those recommendations. Now, on permitting issues, unlike the issues about how much you take, where you fish, how you fish, where you fish, which is the domain of this commission, the statute doesn't give you all the regulatory authority on permitting. But I know that permitting is integral to managing these fisheries. And as a director who reports to you all on all issues, I want your support because if a majority of you think that we're off the rails, you could conceivably seek a different direction.
Maybe I should stay on.
So anyway, so we've got these proposals and there is a memo and I just want to go over those. And I just want to say one more thing, that we convened what we call an industry advisor group, and we invited a subset. We don't call you all subcommittees because there's legal ramifications of being a subcommittee, but we have a subset of this commission. There's 4 of you, and 3 of you attended that meeting. We had a meeting up in Weston. We invited a lot of active participants to that meeting, and we talked through some of these issues. It was a very productive meeting. And then we met with the members of the subgroup of this commission and kind of proposed some ideas, because I don't want to get out ahead of the commission in terms of our thinking and some of our proposals. So we probably want to talk about those to get some initial feedback.
We don't have slides, we could put the memo up, I suppose, or just talk through it.
Yeah, is Jared here?
Yeah, he left for.
Okay, anyway, yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Vice Chair, do I have permission to speak?
Yes, you do.
Thank you, Mr. Vice. One of those moments there. I'll think of it in a second. I'll get back to you. Talk about it.
So some of the things that we are considering in the memo. So there's a memo that describes the meeting. That's a July 31st meeting. And it's a summary of the discussion. And then there's a August 19th memo that talks about what our proposals are. And they are the 2026 to go to owner operator, which means much like many of our other limited entry permits, the permit holder has to be on the boat. And that seems like not a big deal, but believe me, like 1% of the participants don't do that. You know, dad's got the permit, the son takes the boat out. We hear about it. But the other problem we have is when we bring someone in for an adjudicatory hearing to suspend or revoke the permit, what we find out is because it's open access, that person can go get another permit. The wife can take out a permit. So we're talking about an owner operator requirement. We also are concerned about the fish that come in and are not sold, where one of the techniques other states use is to require those commercial permit holders to go to a dealer and get them tagged basically and account for them, because as the memo points out, those fish are not incorporated into the stock assessment. We don't know how many fish are taken with a commercial permit and not sold. Next one is reducing the daily possession limit from 15 to as few as 10. Another is delaying the season start date. As you saw in some of the earlier plots, there was fish are worth more later in the season, but moving that. And if we are going to get a reduced quota, we think we have to squeeze the season in some capacity. And then of course we can move the default season end date earlier, as Eric Nelson just mentioned. It would be kind of difficult if the commercial season were open and the recreational season were closed, and that would have a terrible look about it. So we don't think there's going to be any challenge getting our full quota during the rec season, whatever that season is. And then for the following year, we're talking about creating what we call the filter, with a goal of reducing the permits down to the realm of like 500 to 1,000, preferably closer to 500, just because of the administrative burden. Now, commission members should know that this would reduce DMF's revenues, but DMF actually doesn't get to spend its revenues when it comes to commercial permits. It just goes to the general fund. So we don't have an interest to maintain, a huge amount of permits. And I should also mention, Khalil, you asked like, what is a boat permit? These striped bass permits are endorsements. They're truly permit endorsements on another permit. So many people just check the box, even though they don't fish for striped bass. They're thinking that someday DMF may try to limit it, or someday I might want to do it. So there's a lot of people. I think our statistics show 3/4 of the permits don't contribute any fish to any landings to the fishery. And so we're looking at.
Can I ask a question before we go away from that topic?
Yeah.
Would you do this selectivity based similar to what we did with Tatog a couple of years ago, based on a landing history?
Yeah, that's what we're thinking.
And if you want to get it down to 500 permits, you said, it's going to have to be pretty steep.
Yeah.
All right.
I think you outlined it fairly well in your memo, how you go about doing it. And the question was that I was going to ask. I firmly believe the point of catch tagging would be way to go, but it's logistically probably impossible and very time consuming. You'd have to add more personnel to carry this function out. What is the optimal number that you would like to see as holding a permit for a reduction to get to that point where we could have pointed?
If ASMFC forces our hand to do harvester reporting, then harvester tagging, then we would probably, the optimal would be something in the realm of 300 to 600, because remember at the end of the season we have to claw back a bunch of unused tags. Now, they don't have the problem in Maryland or Virginia because they have individual fishing quotas. And so they just give, it's based on the tags, they know what the fish range is, and here's your tags. So the tagging requirement made a lot of sense in those states because it was quota fraud. Now, Rhode Island is saying, well, we don't have quota fraud in Rhode Island.
Quota what?
Fraud. In other words, in Maryland, and I'm not saying that this, I guess it did happen, but it hasn't happened, no evidence recently, but harvesters were taking more fish than they were allocated. And by putting these tags on the fish and having them be more accountable, that was the solution. So Rhode Island has made a pretty strong case that they don't think that there's fraud within the striped bass fishery, and that needs to be solved with harvester tagging. So we're trying to figure that out. Like we obviously are concerned that if 3/4 of our permit holders don't even land a fish, it begs the question, why are they buying the permit? And we have heard anecdotal stories of people who don't sell them. They just get the commercial permit to take those bigger fish on certain days, and it's still for personal use. Now, personal use has always been a component of the striped bass landing. We recognize that. It's hard for us to put an estimate on how much it is. And as you're squeezing the fishery down, that personal use can raise some eyebrows, because it doesn't get accounted for. So the answer to the simple question is, I think we're looking at 500. But again, depending on whether or not we have to do harvester tagging.
Should be.
Okay, let's just have a couple clarifications about this. Because there's a difference between a striped commercial permit, a guy fishing on land and a guy on a boat. So that guy only gets allowed 2 fish on land. If he takes that permit, goes on somebody's boat, on a boat, is he allowed to get 15 at that point?
2 fish on that permit, because it's based on the permit type, not the.
And also, do you have to have a boat on your commercial permit?
You have a boat permit.
Yeah, boat permit. Oh, well, you know what? Those are questions I think we would have to evolve in a final rule. So
Yeah,
we don't know that
I
yet.
thought there was people going, like 2 people on a boat and then, they got one tag out fishing and then I'll fish on the other guy's permit type of thing.
I think you're talking on operator, which I believe we were gonna discuss.
In the proposals.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a clarification.
Yeah, but that can be discussed and we'll accept it.
This personal, take it home, it goes unreported
Yeah.
quite often. And I think that's also in the document where they're gonna have to come back to the dealer and report that fish, because if it's non-reported, it leads to bad data for management, and everybody wants to blame management. But if the public is out there cheating the system, but they still want to blame management on every action we take.
Anyway, so I wanted to bring this up, not for a final discussion by any means, but just bring it to your attention. It was in your package, and that's the direction we'd like to go. But if you want to, because I know we have other business today, but if you want to think about those things and communicate to us any concerns you might have, or like Tookie's point is a good one. That how are we going to deal with those who weren't eligible to take 15 fish, only 2, like how are we going to treat them? Great questions, and we'll figure that out. But we are talking about putting proposals together for public hearing.
Next month.
Yeah. So
October.
So we can come back next month with something a little bit more definitive.
What is that?
All right.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Another question. So if a guy's bringing a striper home, you're gonna ask him, how think he's gonna have to go to the dealer, and the dealer's gonna have to take care of the paperwork and reporting that fish, he's not even gonna be able to buy it. It's kind of asking a lot of them.
Of the deal, right?
Yeah.
But
I think, what's the interested in doing that?
yeah, we already heard that.
Yeah.
At this meeting, but we have to find some way of having that individual report that fish, 35-inch fish, 20 pounds.
I agree.
There's something maybe it disincentivizes practice. that if you're just gonna take home the fish, but you gotta bring it to the dealer first, you just don't do it.
Danny?
All right, and then Bill.
I'll make a comment. I think the memos, I think reflection of what we discussed in the industry group meeting, and our subgroup meeting. I think it's good overall, but help achieve what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you, Eric. Bill?
Yeah, I just briefly wanted to mention that we'll go forward with this, and I know it's preliminary, that we remember to try and streamline whatever ability we have to transfer what permits will exist, to make it possible for other people down the road to access Great Bass commercially, because that's what's happening. We're losing out on the future of the industry by putting narrower and narrower guardrails in place. So
That was discussed at the subgroup meeting where if you were to turn in your endorsement, your permit, you're wanting the 600 still standing, that it goes into a lottery system for the younger people coming through where they
Something
don't have
like
to
that,
pay the
yeah.
big money. Right?
Thank you.
That was discussed.
that's good to hear. Thank you.
And I'm sure at this next commission meeting, we'll have further discussion and really get into the meat.
Yeah. For someone like
Put it on
myself,
your radar.
I have 4 grandsons. None of them have any permits at this point in their lives, and I know that they're interested in fishing someday, possibly commercially.
So let's just everybody put it on your radar for the next meeting, September 18th. Please be hanging for that. Can we move on or?
Yeah.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Thank you, Director. Pine Barren Alliance's petition to close 3 bays of horseshoe crab harvest. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is how we're gonna run this presentation. I'm gonna provide 45 minutes for discussion for everybody. The petitioner selects a single person, and I presume that will be you. To speak to the petition, 5 to 10 minutes, and I'm gonna put you on the clock.
I have a very brief statement.
Thank you.
And, I would just like to mention, before we start, that Brad Wynn, who is VP of Resilient Habitats for Manamet, is here. Manamet's been doing research in this area, in the PDK area. And also we have Brenda Bolin, who is a biologist and many, many years on the Horseshoe Crab Conservation Association. So if there are any questions, I'd like to ask the chair that these experts, rather than me, I'd be happy to answer questions, be allowed to answer any questions that the commission might have, if you would permit that.
Yeah, or did we want to have DMF present and then let commission members question? Okay, fine.
Yeah, I just wanted you to know that
Questions from commission members?
they don't intend to be part of the presentation, but just would be here for questions that.
You want to call a friend, as they say.
What's that?
You want to phone a friend if you need them.
Yeah.
Sure, all right.
They're here. Thank you. Good morning, all. I'm Cheryl.
Let me interrupt for a minute. Excuse me, I'm sorry to do this. For the new members, you came to Kingston with a folder for the Pine Barrens.
Yes, it was part of the packet.
Yeah, so this is your second appearance before the commission.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Just so
On
so that-
this issue.
you know.
Okay. Well, good morning. I'm Cheryl Heller, President of the Southeastern Massachusetts Pine Barrens Alliance, or SEMPA for short. Thank you so much for this opportunity to discuss our proposal to close Plymouth, Kingston, Duxbury Bay, or PKD, to horseshoe crab harvesting. SEMPA has been conducting spawning surveys for the Division of Marine Fisheries since 2019, and we deeply value our partnership. We respect Director McKiernan and Derek Perry for their professionalism and collaborative approach. And regardless of today's decision, we remain committed to supporting the DMF and continuing our role in these surveys. Our proposal rests on 3 points: current management, historical data, and economic effects, noting most importantly that this closure will not cause economic harm to fishermen. First, current management. After 17 years of management, we have yet to see meaningful increases in horseshoe crab numbers in PKD. Even with the new April 15th, June 7th closure, the 2025 survey results remain troubling. At Long Beach on Plymouth, we counted just 122 crabs all season. Of those, 105 were recorded in May during the closure. After the harvest reopened on June 7th, we counted only 17 crabs, and this at a time when spawning should have been at its peak. The DMF graphs may suggest stability, but the numbers are very low. In 2024, we counted just 73 crabs on Long Beach. In 2025, the total was 122. On paper, that looks like a 67% increase, but in reality, it means a shift from half a crab per quadrant to 9/10 of a crab per quadrant. Counting fractions of crabs is not meaningful recovery. We are not seeing a rebound. We are seeing incremental fluctuations in a depleted population. In Duxbury, Mr. Perry's chart for female density from 2008 to 2025 shows values far below historic levels. A decade ago, the densities on this chart were 3 to 10 times higher, with peaks in 2013 and 2016. Since then, the numbers have collapsed and remain persistently low, highlighting the urgent need for stronger protection measures. Second, the historical record. Our proposal includes official reports from Duxbury's Shellfish Constable, showing that from 1953 through 2000, thousands of horseshoe crabs were killed each year to protect the shellfish industry. In 1967 alone, 20,000 crabs were destroyed on Duxbury beaches. By the time DMF began its spawning surveys in 2008, the population was already severely depleted, a fact confirmed by historical records, not merely anecdotal accounts. Kingston's records are similar, with records dating back to the 1940s. As late as 1976, Kingston reported much work was done this past summer on killing horseshoe crabs. This program will continue this year. Today, by contrast, finding even a single horseshoe crab molt in Kingston Bay is so rare that people get genuinely excited, so much so that they'll take a photo and share it on Instagram or Facebook. It's striking to think that we've gone from tens of thousands of crabs being killed in a single year to celebrating the sight of a leftover shell. Finally, economics. Recent harvest numbers in PKD are extremely low. Mr. Perry confirmed that in 2024, only 1 fisherman reported harvesting in the bay. And in 2025, there were no landings at all. Closing PKD is not likely to cause economic harm to local fishermen. In conclusion, nearly 2 decades of management have not produced a meaningful recovery of horseshoe crabs in PKD, nor has the bay provided a reliable fishery. What we propose instead is an opportunity that, if approved, in time could benefit all of the horseshoe crab's constituents, the birds and sea creatures that depend on their eggs, the fishermen who supply bait and biomedical industries, and conservationists who want to see healthier coastal ecosystems, and the crabs themselves. We urge you to advance our request to create a horseshoe crab refuge in the PKD embayment to the public hearing process. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from commission member. Leo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What was the cost? How much did the single harvester, crab pie, horseshoe crab harvester, I'll just call it crab, How much did that person make that year?
That's not,
Well, that's confidential, yeah, DMF wouldn't disclose that because there's only
I
one.
forgot about that.
yeah.
It's confidential. Well,
Bill. Khalil,
Plymouth Beach do you test on?
We're inside the bay,
All the way up.
yeah, right at the, hard to describe, the arm comes out like this, we're inside the bay.
From
Beach
the
side.
plug in.
So Bill Doyle, you're good?
Now,
Bill Amber.
thank you very much. I appreciate your dedication and your desire to see these animals recover in your abatement. They're very important. We're blessed where I come from, with a population that's very stable. But I have to say, if the amount of crabs that have been harvested is so low and the response to recovery has been virtually impossible to accumulate, are you doing something in terms of alternative improvements to the habitat that might be beneficial? And I say that because torture crabs, like any other creature that lives in the water, needs to have a habitat that is healthy and promotes their existence, spawning and grow out. Do you think that these embayments, because of water quality and the lack of food for the mature crabs, has something to do with the fact that they're not recovering?
Well, clearly, there's many factors that go into whether or not horseshoe crabs spawn. Brad, is this something that you'd feel like answering?
Not an expert, I'm shorebird biologist, I think like a shorebird more than.
Well, then I'll just say last year we tried to have horseshoe crabs state listed as a species of concern, hoping to draw attention to these trouble spots where we might actually be able to bring resources in to study and to do more remediation of these bays. Brenda has been noticing. Brenda, would you like to?
I think that's a very important question that Mr. Amaru has raised. And I do think that I can speak only for Duxbury Bay, which I've been observing for several years. I believe that Duxbury has to pay more attention to the very questions that you're raising. I don't know what the effect might be on the crabs, but our crabs are looking to be in very difficult shape. I think they're in tough shape. That they appear, many of them appear to be damaged and blackened with age and appear not to have molted in a long time.
I know in my village, in my town in Orleans, we passed an ordinance 2 years ago, a town meeting, to advise the community that use of fertilizer and phosphorus detergents has a detrimental effect on the environment of our saltwater embayments. Our embayments are shoaling up tremendously in the Nauset estuary. By natural accumulation of sands, we're not getting the exchange of salt water. We're having a long-term oxygen deprivation that they study annually, and every year it gets worse and worse and worse. And we're seeing fewer and fewer horseshoe crabs in our embayments as well, where their population is steady and healthy, I think, very, very good, is in the areas where it's closest to the inlet, where there's the exchange of cold ocean water that occurs twice a day during our tidal tides. And I think that that is probably one of the greatest, and I believe you just expressed that sense, that if you were to go to the town and perhaps with the citizens petition, go to these individual towns and have the towns become aware of it and vote to ban and to limit, at least to limit fertilizers, other nutrients that exacerbate the use of oxygen on the bottom, you'd see an improvement because the shellfish would return. I have the feeling that your shellfish beds are probably not anywhere near what they once were. That's the food source. And then the quality and the levels of oxygen would return, and I think you'd see an improvement. That's my own personal take on it.
Thank you, Bill. Can we get back questioning about her presentation. I mean, you can follow up with
No,
these.
that's all right. I've said everything I want to say.
Thank you. Bill, question?
Thank you for coming in. I work in PKD. Well over 200 days a year on the ground, in the water. The areas where our oyster farms are, I can tell you, the last few years, we have to step over around horseshoe crabs from the 1st of May up until like a week or so ago when they moved on. This is not something that we saw 10 years ago. So I've seen quite an increase in horseshoe crab population, and actually we have 5 species of crabs, and they all seem to be heading up. The only thing I might suggest is where the sampling is done, maybe take a look at a different area. I know over in Saquosh up going back up to Gurnett Creek, there's a lot of horseshoe crabs over there. And I never see them out of the water. I always see them in the water.
Thank you, Bill. Once again, can we get back questions on the presentation and not comment or anything to debate? Khalil.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what would you like to see as a refuge? What is it? What do you define as a refuge? Is there a legal term for that?
Well, an area where it would be prohibited to fish horseshoe crabs, because we know, or we sense that horseshoe crabs are being taken as soon as the season opens, and we don't have any left to count, because it's typical for us to see horseshoe crabs in fairly reasonable numbers up until a fishery opens. And even though this fishery, say the data or the permit shows that no one's taking crabs there, something's happening to those crabs. So where are they in June? They should be there. And it is true that there are some good numbers of horseshoe crabs out on Saquosh. And I heard from the harbor master in Plymouth that he knows that there's a fisherman that targets that area. Maybe he didn't do it last year, but and they'll come and take hundreds off the beach in 1 or 2 days. So more needs to be done. And if we could create a refuge on this side of Cape Cod, there are horseshoe crab refuges south of Cape Cod in the federally protected areas, but there's nothing protecting horseshoe crabs north of Cape Cod. And if we lose these populations, especially in this embayment that was once, well known for high ranked for nurseries and spawning areas, if we lose these crabs, where are the populations going to come from in this area? So.
Thank you. Khalil, is it a question?
Yes, I want to follow. So my understanding is we've spoken very little. I mean, I would be lying if I said we haven't spoken before. We really haven't spoken much in depth about this. You're here today to give us what you would like to have happen to the bay, but your real purpose is to try to get this into a public comment type of
Public meeting, public hearing.
Thank you. I'm gonna move on to the state because we're done with questions here for you. Derek, would you like to present?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, so my name is Derek Perry. I did a review of the proposal from Cheryl. She clearly did a lot of work here. A lot to unpack. So I'm going to focus on a few things. Next slide, please. So most I'm going to focus on is fisheries data and the population status. My job mostly revolves around these 2 things. I'm a state horseshoe crab biologist. I'm a state representative for the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission's Technical Committee for Horseshoe Crabs, as well as a stock assessment biologist on the stock assessment committee for ASUSC. So this is basically the core of my job right here, talking about fisheries data and population status. We start with commercial fisheries data. So the map on the left shows the 5-year means of horse crab landings in the state for most of the landings are down there in Nantucket Sound. About 85% of the landings come from that one area. 9% come from Cape Cod Bay, and that's spread out across all of Cape Cod Bay, from Duxbury, Barnstable, Wellfleet, and Flattop Brewster. Most of that harvest for Cape Cod Bay is from Barnstable. There's smaller amounts in other areas. There's also smaller amounts in Buzzards Bay and Vineyard Sound. And I can see the impact of the regulations we put in place in 2024. That harvest shifted most of the Nantucket Sound. There's very little harvest now in Cape Cod Bay. So this is looking at just Plymouth Kingston Duxbury Bay. The shellfish harvesters or horse crab harvesters have to report by shellfish growing area. So this is shellfish growing area 42 through 47. So that's inside Duxbury Bay. On the table on the right, you can see the year, number of crabs harvested. There's a bunch of C's there. That's because it's confidential. There's only 1 or 2 guys harvesting crabs in that area. You see in 2017 through 2019, there was at least 3 guys harvesting there, so we can report that data. One click. But if we group those years 2013 to 2016, there's at least 3 guys who fished that area all those years combined. So we can release that information. So almost 1,000 crabs are harvested annually in that region for 2013 to 2016. Same in 2020 to 2023, there's at least 3 guys in there harvested over those course of those 4 years for an average of about 2,000 crabs. In 2024, that number was greatly reduced by the new closure. There was 1 guy who harvested in April before the new closure was put into place, but after the April 15th date. So that date was put in, the new regulations put in a little bit later than we were intended to. They went in place in late April. The closure is supposed to start April 15th. That guy harvested just after the closure was supposed to start in April, but before it actually went into place in 2024. In 2025, so far, there's no harvest. So since that spawning closure went in place, there's been no harvest in PKD Bay. Next. So statewide, the April 15th to June 7th closure was enacted in 2024. Prohibits harvests of horseshoe crabs during 90% of the time where we see them on the beaches. This is consistent with areas that we have in the state, as well as other areas outside the state that have no fishing, such as New Hampshire. So it's consistent. This is how crabs spawn. There's a peak in late May, early June. After that, it tapers off. That's natural. The number of days that were closed by the spawning closure doubled the previous number of closed days in the lunar closures. Lunar closures had 25 closed days. With the new spawning closure, it's 54. These regulations limit hand harvesters' access to crabs. Basically, what we're seeing is a lot of hand harvesters give up their permits and turn to them to draggers. So we're seeing much less hand harvesting now. It's going to offshore areas. From 2013 through 2024, 97% of the landings in PKD came from the area that's now closed by regulation. So basically, there's no harvest there anymore because that's when crabs were accessible by the hand harvesters. 2024 regulations are expected to greatly reduce already low PKD harvest, and it is. To date, there's been no reported harvest in PKD since regulations were enacted in 2024. Horseshoe landings from Cape Cod Bay have dropped to 1% in 2024. So it's about 9% on average. Now it's down to 1% because there's no dragging in there for landing horseshoe crabs. It's allowed, we don't really do it. It's mostly done south of Cape Cod and fluke fishers. Harvest is shifted away from the coastal embayments down to Nantucket Sound. And all PKD harvest in 2013 and 2024 was taken with bait permits. There's no biological harvest in that area. This has not been reported. There should have been one more slide in there. I think it just missed. Nope. No. Okay. So what should be there, I don't know why it's not there. There should be a map, which I don't think I can just show this here. But basically what it is it shows 85%, and there's a new map for 2024 shows 96% of the crabs coming from Nantucket Sound. So now moving on to, sorry, where we were.
That map?
Yeah, I already had, sorry, I did out of order on screen. Now we talk about the fisheries independent surveys. This is how we monitor the population. We have 3 different surveys, some of them go back over 40 years. So we can tell how the population has been doing over those last 40 years or so. Some of these surveys go back more than that. We didn't collect horse crab data until, for example, the trawl survey didn't start collecting horse crab data by sex to 1982. It was back in the 70s. We didn't do it by sex till 82. The same survey goes back to about 76. We didn't count horseshoe crabs consistently to 1984. These are relative abundance surveys. So what it's looking to do is looking at the proportion of crabs that are out there, and basically we're counting for proportion of those crabs. It's not a census. What it's doing is it's trying to count the proportion of crabs that are out there. So if we see an increase in crab abundance, it should be reflected in these surveys. Slide. Some of the claims from this proposal. We're spotting crabs in PKD as plummeted since the 1970s. We don't have any data going back to the 1970s. It doesn't really start till since 2008, when the service first started in Duxbury. Crab spawning in Duxbury and Western Cuba Bay are at historic lows. We'll look at that from a spawning survey. Next. Recent DNF surveys reveal a sharp decline in spawning bush crab activity across PKD. We'll look at that as well through the data. After more than a decade of closures, there's been no conservation outcomes. We'll look at that. There's been continued population declines according to the proposal. We'll look at that. Continued declines in New England, citing old IUCN reports, which is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And also DMF has consistently reported increasing numbers of crabs. That is true, which some contend is misleading because it includes data from areas including Pleasant Bay, which are close to bait harvest. We'll look at that as well. So from our trawl survey, on the top you have the spring survey. That goes to 2025, because the spring survey 2025 already occurred. The bottom two figures are from the fall. Females on the left, males on the right. That red dashed line, the time series median. The blue line is the lowest smoother. You can kind of think of it like a moving average. It's not a moving average. We kind of operate the same way, where the every data points includes where that line goes. And the shaded area is a confidence interval around that line. This is the stratified mean number of crabs, again from the Gulf of Maine area, which is the same stock as one thing Duxbury Bay, the number of crabs per tow. One bunch of data. So what you can see there is a difference between 2010 and the lunar closures that went into place. Now, this is an area which did not have much harvest. Usually about 9% of the state harvest comes from this area. So I'm not seeing big increases here, but it does seem to be an inflection point in some of these data points. So we're seeing slight increases in some of the areas over there. Some of the highest data points have been in the spring, have occurred recently. The 2025 data points for females was the fifth highest in the time series. There's also below the time series median for males as well. There is a low point there for the fall females. There's about 5 data points that's below the time series median. We're keeping an eye on that. Next. Now we're looking at southern New England. This is from the south side of the Cape. Seeing big increases in the spring. The 2025 survey, it's the highest data point on record for females. So we're seeing nice increase in trends there. The highest data points have all occurred recently. In the fall, it's kind of staying around the time series median. So from 2010 on, you've seen some pretty big increase, especially in the spring survey. So it looks like we're seeing an impact on those lunar closures or something else around that point in time. We can't necessarily say it's because of the lunar closures, but something happened around then. We're seeing an increase in most of our surveys around that 2010 year. Next. This is looking at our same survey that's happened south of Cape Cod. Again, big increase in trend. Haven't had a data point below the time series median, which is that gray line, in over a decade. We're seeing an increase in these population 2 in survey 2. That red dashed line is that start of that lunar closures. Since that point in time, seeing nice increases. Moving on to the spawning survey, especially sites 1 and 2, which are Duxbury and Long Beach. These sites are done by volunteers. DMF does a few of them, but mostly rely on volunteers to do this survey. Mass Island was a bunch. Semba, North and South River Watershed Association, Duxbury, they do the quality surveys. Next. Just looking at the data from Duxbury. What we have here is a couple of data points in 2013 for the night surveys, which are that blue turquoise color. Big data point in 2016, which is that red one. Outside of that, it kind of stays around the time series medians. The medians are the dashed lines, so the red one for the daytime, the turquoise one's the evening surveys. Basically doesn't deviate too much from time series medians outside of those 2 years, 2013 and 2016. So it's fairly stable. Next. This is looking at Long Beach, a shorter time series just started 2019. But again, fairly close to the time series median for the most part. 2025 was right at the time series. So we're not seeing huge declines there. It's kind of bouncing around the time series median. But we don't have the data for 2025 from all of our beaches yet. If you have it from some, this breaks down the 2024 data. We have Cape Cod Bay by region, Outer Cape Cod, which is the east-facing beaches in the other Cape, so Pleasant Bay and Nauset. Nantucket Sound, where about over 90% of the harvest comes from, in Buzzards Bay, which usually has about 2% harvest. All the beaches there are listed, and beaches are sometimes surveyed for both day and night surveys, sometimes just day, so it's broken down by day and night surveys. The next column, 2024 risk median, shows which of the survey sites were above the time series medians or below. In 2024, 74% were above the time series medians. And then if you look at the next column over the 10-year trends, 90% of our surveys are above have increasing trends over the last 10 years. So it's really, really positive. 7 of those beaches have statistically significant increasing trends. Over the last 15 years, which is that column to the right, 75% of our survey sites have increasing trends, with 3 significant in increasing. There is one in Buzzards Bay that's significant in decreasing. I think that's a habitat issue. Can you go back on the slide, please? So if you include 2025 data, you see that red spot up there, 2024 versus median. If you use 2025 data, none of those spots are red anymore. They're all either at or above the time series medians. But the 10 and 15-year trends do not change. There's still red ones and the one green one. Long Beach is not a long time series, but their trends are slightly negative. Moving on to stock assessments. So in 2000, usually about every 5 years, we do a stock assessment for horseshoe crabs. I was on the committee for 2024. I was not in 2019 or previously. The 2019 stock assessment is a terminal year of 2017. We're in the Northeast region. Basically, the Northeast region is just massive Rhode Island. So what this assessment does, it looks at the number of surveys that have not increased since management took place in 1998 for horseshoe crabs. In 1998, the fisheries management plan for horseshoe crabs was released by ASMFC.
Mr. King. Tom is waiting for you.
So basically what we see is 2009, 20, and 2013, most of our surveys are doing poorly. That turned around a little bit in 2019. The mass surveys started doing well. Rhode Island was not, so they balanced out to the neutral status. So the Northeast has improved from poor to neutral. Massachusetts index shows increasing trends since 1998. The document is unanimously approved by every single state and federal horseshoe crab biologist on the East Coast, as well as peer reviewers for that benchmark assessment. So if you're not listening to every single state and federal horseshoe crab biologist on the East Coast, who are you listening to? They're all saying the population of the state is increasing. For the 2024 assessment, the terminal year is 2022. Massachusetts continues to have an increasing trend. Coastline status improved from neutral goods, still there. The document is unanimously approved by every single state and federal horseshoe biologist on the East Coast. It wasn't by peer reviewers because it's just a stock update, but it was approved by every single state and federal horseshoe biologist on the East Coast. There's another assessment done by the IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature. This was heavily cited in their proposal, but used older data. This is their most recent report. First line from that new report from their peer-reviewed paper: American horseshoe crab populations are recovering. The Delaware Bay population has more than doubled. The Northeast population has improved. The Gulf of Maine population, where PKD exists, is stable. Now looking at the proposed assertions of historical abundance. So what Cheryl was referring to earlier with our compliance report, at one point in time in the compliance report, we had maps like this and tables that designated juvenile habitat and spawning beaches as major or minor spawning habitat, or high, moderate, or reported in the table. This was based mostly on Shellfish Council's records. So basically it wasn't one statewide thing. It was a town Shellfish Council saying, hey, this beach here is pretty good, it's high, this one's kind of low. It was town by town. They also use the surveys of fishers and public comments. The designations are not standardized for major, minor, high, moderate, or reported. There's no data to base comparisons between current and historical numbers. Their historical numbers were not, or historical standards, not based on data, just opinions. So you can't make determinations of how the numbers have changed, increased, or are stable from those documents. So to summarize, the proposed goals largely have already been addressed by the 2024 regulation change. 97% of PKD harvests from 2013 to 2024 occurred during the period that's now closed. And in fact, there's been no harvest since that closure went into effect. Prohibiting PKD harvest is unlikely to have a measurable population impact because there's no harvest there already. Proposals claim statewide and abatement-specific declines are not supported by data or exaggerated. Survey data go back 40 years. Population increases prior to surveys are anecdotal or speculative. PKD does have mixed survey trends. Most of them are negative, but they're all slight, whether they're positive or negative. This also can be termed as stable, which IUCN calls that region anyway. Most mass survey data shows positive trends. It's a record for females in 2025 spring survey in southern region. 90% of responding surveys show increasing trends in the last 10 years. Same survey has been above the time series median in the last 11 years. ASMFC stock assessment and IUCN note increasing trends south of Cape Cod and increasing stable trends north of Cape Cod. So overall, as a state, we're doing pretty well. Without taking any questions.
So if I could, are there any questions for Derek? Because I'd just like to summarize. So I, like, Bill mentioned, Bill Amaru, I also appreciate the passion of the conservation community on these larger issues. Just yesterday, I was privy to an Audubon document that was sent to its membership about horseshoe crabs are recovering, and there was some record counts on some beaches this year. So clearly we're going in the right direction. And BMF spends almost as much man hours on horseshoe crabs as we do on American lobster. American lobster is a $100 million fishery. So we're really taking this seriously. I will concede to the petitioners that unlike maybe the southeastern part of Cape Cod Bay, where you may have some movement between, let's say, Provincetown, Wellfleet down to Barnstable Harbor, this area is probably more isolated, and I think that's probably what's driving your thinking in that you want to see conservation in that specific location. But I just want to say that we've done that. This rule that we enacted last year, which was a very painful rule to some of the people at this table and some of those who have just left, was a really painful one to take the spawning beaches away from those historical harvesters. And so I think there's a lot of information here that's counter to your concerns about the state of affairs.
I was just gonna point out, like, to Dan's point about the limited population there is some tagging data from that area. It does show that they don't move a lot from that area. For the most part, if you look at, say, Wellfleet, most of the crabs that leave Wellfleet, if you log that data for 6 months, most of those crabs are found outside of Wellfleet Harbor. Look at the data for Duxbury, most of it, about 95% is still found inside Duxbury Harbor, so they don't seem to leave very much. So I would agree with that part.
And I would also, Derek showed some numbers that in 1 year, we had over 6,000 crabs taken. It's possible that was excessive, given the standing stock of horseshoe crabs in that embayment, which we don't know what that is. But the rule that we enacted last year has basically eliminated the ability of someone to harvest for commercial purposes, because, we talk about time is money. I mean, a commercial fisherman's not going to spend a day fishing and find 4 crabs. They're just not going to do it. In fact, the individual, Derek mentioned this, the individual who was probably the highliner was upset with us and basically sold his permit and is now no longer in the fishery. So, and as far as the concerns about the condition of the crabs, we think that in that area, crabs grow slower, but they also reach a terminal molt at a certain age, and then they start to look like crab because they've got all this biofouling and they've got crepidula on them and barnacles, and they aren't going to look like a freshly molted crab that's very healthy. And then as far as the fact that your survey counts went down after the June 7th opening or June 8th opening, I think, Derek, you can speak to this. Every beach goes down after the June 8th opening because most of the harvest has occurred prior to that. And spawning. I'm sorry, the spawning. And the other thing is we actually, Laura Tomlinson is here, and she gave a presentation at a scientific conference and looked at average temperatures from the 1950s by date and compared it to the current. And I think Cheryl, you had mentioned that spawning should still be occurring into June. Well, that's true historically, but there's a shift now in the spawning period. And that's why we backed up this closure all the way into April, because we believe these animals are spawning earlier. And so that's why we targeted those days to cover 90% of the spawning period. Now, in the rest of the state, we have, like Nantucket Sound, we have mobile gear. And so that's where most of the crabs, how most of them are being harvested, especially in bait fishery, because they don't have access to the beaches anymore, which is easy picking. So, you know, but can that happen in Plymouth, Kingston, Duxbury? No, because Plymouth, Kingston, Duxbury is an internet area. Nobody's trawling in there. And you're not allowed to trawl out to 3 miles between May and October by historical state regulations. So for all of those reasons, I'd really, you know, and I think some of the commission members, you know, felt a little trauma after the vote a couple of years ago and don't want to sort of reopen those wounds. But I think we got this covered. I think the data that we've shown show the indirect effect of that spawning closure has essentially eliminated harvest in that area. And I don't want to get into a management strategy where every embayment, because we don't have the resources to estimate population size in each embayment. We're not even sure, as Derek mentioned, the movement in and out of the embayment. But this might have been a decent idea a decade ago if it was necessary at all. But now that we've got this new management regime, I just don't think it's necessary. You know, and I appreciate the support that we've gotten from you all and some of our other conservation measures. And hopefully these beach counts will go up. You know, Audubon seems to be finding way more crabs, and maybe next year you guys will see them as well. So, you know, so today the conversation with the commission members is from me to you that in light of what we heard, I don't want to take it to public hearing, but if it's the desire of the commission, I will do that. You know, but if I show these same data to the public, I think they're going to come up. I hope they're as convincing as I think they are. So what do you guys say about you folks on the commission? What's your feeling about this going forward?
Seems like there's sufficient evidence that the population is doing fine, and you know, that the harvest has decreased almost to nothing in that area, and that there's maybe other factors in line like shifts or spawning habitat issues, things like that, and not really harvest being the main issue.
At this point, by the way, Bill Doyle is acting as chair. So he's the vice chair. So Ray.
Yeah. Sorry.
There any other? Any other comments on the commission?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I've got mixed emotions about it. I read a letter from Jamie Bassett and Matthew Belson, and that sets up a whole nother, these are letters that you sent out to us. Sets up a whole slew of emotions in myself regarding selling a crab for 25 cents. They can't sell the bait. They're trying to sell it out of state. I mean, I understand the, this is mixing apples and oranges.
A closure to everyone, not just the bait fishery.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that when I read something like that, I really you get emotional about the horseshoe crab. Then I hear the logic back and forth, what Mr. Amaru has described to us. I also described that same scenario to Ms. Heller. And then I said to myself, do you really need to have a closure or a refuge? And the other side of me says, well, maybe if it is a refuge, and we're not talking whether it should be a refuge or not, because that would come out of deliberations of the public hearing. I'm in favor of a public hearing. There's nothing wrong with airing it to the public. Bring it. Derek, you had great presentation. You can't take that away from you. But I think there's a bigger issue here. We're talking about conservation of a species that doesn't seem to be in trouble according to ASMFC or in certain areas. But would a refuge designation bring greater conservation efforts to that area? It might.
Well,
in other words, Bill talked about the.
Before you go on, I don't have the authority to declare refuge. I would only, make a regulation. That
I understand that, but I'm trying to look at both sides of the story. One side of me says, does it really need to be a refuge? The other side says, well, if it is a refuge, maybe more can be done for conservation efforts, not affecting any commercial endeavor that might come out with other species. But I think what they want to do is their wish today is to bring it to public hearing. I'm for it. maybe the rest of the commission isn't, and that's up to everybody's, you know, conscious or feelings to how they feel about it. I mean, this is my last meeting, so after today, you won't hear from me anymore. But I personally have no issue, and I don't know what it takes to take it. I haven't been part of that process. What does it take to take something to public hearing? What are the metrics that would designate a public hearing type of
It
a?
would be, well, it's my discretion to say yes, but I'm looking for your input. And then we do paperwork, we draft regulations, we describe the impacts of those regulations through, maybe many days worth of work, because it's a big package when we go to hearing. But we serve that up to the department, to Executive Office of Environmental Affairs, Administration of Finance, and then ultimately on behalf of the governor. So this would be a package with other items, but the questions will be, well, who's going to be negatively affected by this? And, so we would say, well, none, because there isn't any harvest there anymore. So I might get some challenges, but the challenge is not going to be from the commercial fishermen, although we might feel insulted, but we essentially closed harvest, then here we come again. But maybe let the other commission members weigh in.
Thank you, Clue. Point of information, Jared, this is not an action item, so there will be no vote.
Unless.
No, it's not an action item, but I want to hear it from, I can count.
Anyone else?
Thank you. I've been around here for a while. Never seen this format take place like this. If we hear from the division that we're gonna put up present a petition from the public type of thing. Never talked about pre-petition before, so I'm just kind of at a loss here.
Well, because Cheryl came to the commission with this, and used a lot of our data, I felt that we probably should bring Cheryl back to you as the commission, because you were served this document, and to explain, because if, I thought it would be appropriate for us to counter some of the arguments, or at least explain some of these trends. So that's why she's here today. I just thought, and because it is a controversial issue and there's a lot of advocates for horseshoe crabs, I just thought we would give them an audience and also this kind of data sharing.
Well, I'll be upfront then, and I'll say I was probably against what took place the last time around. We took all these loon soldiers away from the original harvesters. The hand pickers were the first people to ever harvest the hand crabs. I mean, it wasn't the dragons that did it, hand pickers. We basically put them all out of business, so this is just another way to put them out of business, I guess. We'll start a trend of some type, I would think. This won't be the first day we'll hear about this guy should be closed to protect them. We already know that just about 100% protected here now. What more can the division do for these crabs in Plymouth? I agree with Bill, it's a pollution issue of some type. It's nothing to do with who harvested them, or there's no harvest going on there, so I'm not in favor of going any farther with this position.
Anyone else?
Chris? Yeah, I guess I feel like I feel like it's sort of a slippery slope to open up fisheries closure in a place that the data doesn't support that. It seems to me like creating an opportunity for more public input and more opportunities for other restoration is like really valuable in these bays, but it doesn't feel like fishing is presently the problem. And I think it doesn't sound like DMF thinks that fishing is the problem. And so it feels like kind of a hard sell to go to public hearing for a fisheries problem that doesn't seem like a fisheries problem. And so I think about it more like a man hours we asked the DMF staff to do a lot of things. There are plenty of things that are actually on fire right now. And so this doesn't really feel like a great use of resources. If the fishing situation was to change and suddenly there was harvest in this area, I think I would invite the conversation to come back, but it doesn't feel like it's really a fisheries problem right now.
Else. Right. I just want to recognize the efforts and the good work and partnership that Pine Barrens Alliance has made with DMF. I think that's why they're one of the reasons that primarily they're here. Okay, next we have reporting. Bob?
Yes.
Just one.
This is a proposal by DMF to go headlong into the 21st century and basically eliminate paper
We're losing our,
reporting.
we're losing our,
Did you go to the restroom?
no, Mr. Vice Chair, should we
Take a break?
get a lunch break, have a working lunch to hear this as we do, as we have done in the past?
Yeah, just keeping in mind that we got a storm coming in and there's a lot of people that need to get back to work.
With paper reporting. Over time, more and more people are using electronic reporting and it's just the way we want to go. It's going to save us some resources and it's going to change the game from use resources to key punch. And then we'll move those resources into auditing and make sure the data is sound.
It's the right way to go.
Yeah, good, yeah.
Yeah, you guys received the memo we wrote to our department on this. There's just a couple of quick highlights. So the plan is to implement this for March 1st, 2027. What this does is it gives us a year and a half to do outreach, to encourage people to transition early, and just gives us time to get everything in place to go headfirst into this on that date. That date is also significant because it allows, it's the day, so limited entry and striped bass permits currently must be renewed by February 28th. So this would allow all of 2026 to be entered on paper for those who want to do so. And then on March 1st, everything that comes in would be electronic, whether it's for 26 or 27, doesn't matter. But this would allow anyone who wants to do paper for 2026 to complete the year. The programs that we use are all run through ACCSP at the moment. That means they are free to the users, but you would need to purchase your own device. A device can be a phone, a tablet, computer, as long as it can get on the internet at some point. It does not have to be on the internet to use the application, use the mobile applications. It does for the online right now, but you can use it at T and come back onto Wi-Fi somewhere and upload the trips, or you can do it all from a Wi-Fi based location.
That automatically, that's it.
You do have to submit once you come back into range. Currently, I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about permits, but we have about 7,500 to 8,000 permit holders in Massachusetts. Of those, about 1,800 are federally reporting now. So we have around 6,000 people reporting to the state. Of those, about half are already reporting electronically. So we're really only talking about the remaining half of those harvesters, which is around 3,000, and probably less than that by the time we get to 2027. What we plan to do to support this is we will have an exemption program based on age or disability. We're still fleshing out the details of that, but we would plan to mimic programs like what Maine did for their 6,000 lobster harvesters, or what Garfo is doing for their federal, their entire federal fleet. We also plan to do quite a lot of outreach for this program. In 2027, in early 2027 into the summer of 2027, we do plan to do in-person training at various locations throughout the state. We'll also plan to have in-person office hours in our current office in Gloucester and New Bedford, probably weekly or bi-weekly, depending on location. we'll have phone support by DMF staff, which is what we currently do. But that will just be available during business hours. But there's also a ACCSP supported vendor that does a 24/7 help desk as well. Then we have a lot of help materials that you can use on your own. If none of those are, if you can't call into a help desk. We're also transitioning our staff to go from, like Dan said, more of an entry focus to more of an auditing focus. We hope this will clean up the data, make it more accessible sooner and cleaner. And we hope to be able to get back to people when we have questions on reports within 4 to 6 weeks, if not sooner, rather than the 4 to 6 months or more than that now. Sometimes it's a year and a half later, we're calling somebody and say, what did you do on this day in 2023? And that's just because of the volume of paper we have to deal with and the volume of data we're working with. And other programs exist already. Like I mentioned, Garco is 100% electronic 2021, Maine since 2023 in their lobster fleet. All our dealers are electronic now. And the Southeast region and the HMS are also exploring electronic options or requirements. There's also other things that this could benefit. We'll call this one-stop reporting. So if someone has requirements from a Garfo boat, an HMS boat, and a state boat or a state permit, and they're all slightly different, they can do it all in one form once we get this going. So there's a lot of benefits to moving to electronic reporting. And we're 15 years on from when we started this. We've offered it optionally ever since we started. But the technology is there, the support is there now. I think we are ready to hit the ground running if this happens. I'll take questions on it.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I'm an advocate for this type of reporting, electronic reporting, with copies over to the state. And I'll also admit that I'm a dinosaur when it comes to anything like modern electronics. I was intimidated when I started out. But after you've done a handful and you get used to the process and you've got support, in my case, I have a support manager in Woods Hole who's very helpful when I have a problem. It is not a difficult thing at all to transition into. It's in fact far easier and takes less time than scribbling and then wondering whether or not your mail gets delivered. So I'm a strong advocate of it, and if it helps to create a better environment for management, which ultimately benefits the resource and us as fishermen, I'm in favor of it. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, also very strong supporter. I have pretty much only heard from people who describe their experience with a transition in federal reporting, exactly what Bill described. And in some ways, the way you put this forward with, I think, a really good description of a support plan makes it sound harder than it is. And so just thinking about the language that you use, I think most people I've talked to describe their transition on the federal side, just like Bill, like it seemed intimidating. It's actually easier for me. So just to think about how we talk about this, it's not actually that hard, I don't think.
That's a good point. We put this out there because people are intimidated. We're like, we have the support. You can call us, we'll walk you through it. We answer the phone. We're there all the time.
And I totally, I agree with that, but I think you might just lead with like, most people who've done this find it to be an easy transition. We're happy to help you along the way. And then I guess my other point is just, there have been many, as you mentioned, a lot of systems have transitioned from, coffee stained handwritten stuff to electronic, and almost everybody describes the benefits, but there have been almost zero reports about benefits. And so as you guys think about how you're going to do this transition, I would love it if, a year after the transition, you were collecting the information necessary to say, here are the actual quantifiable benefits in time of reporting availability, in DMF cost of managing the program, and all of those things to basically make the case for the sort of fisheries management and economic benefits of switching to an electronic system, because there are always going to be places who are still wondering about that. And I encourage Garfo to do this, and they did not. But I think you guys are in a better position to do that. So just thinking about if this is successful, it'd be great to report out on the successes and ongoing challenges to help other people make a similar decision.
Right.
Okay, thank you. I do electronic reporting for the state, and actually, I got an email at home that I got yesterday from last time I went online and did it. A couple of squares that I don't think are necessary for a lofted part of it, and the other part of it is changing, I guess you call it your favorites bar. I just have a hard time changing, because I'm, as I was putting traps out, you had to change them on traps and stuff. And once you locked it in, yeah, actually, I had to erase a couple of different squares every time I put traps out.
Yep.
Instead of going back to my favorites thing and just putting them all in zero, so I can just put in what I wanted there. That was probably getting phone calls, talking to people now, I haven't had any issues with them. I don't know what I did wrong. I didn't go find out. They put the date on. I didn't look at it. So I'll get around to it. Tell them.
Yeah, we are trying actually to start doing some more real-time review of some data right now. So
Yeah, I've
probably
got one in the
that.
past, like, months ago. So.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody should complain about it. It's still a little difficult to write it down. But I did federal circuit court, so it is easy once you get going on it.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I report for recreational activity on my charter head boat, and it's quick, easy, painless, clean. I'm not dealing with paper or anything like that. So I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a great idea. I've been using paper reporting for stripers, and as I keep on doing it, it stays updated with spreadsheet. I'm surprised it's been forced earlier. I welcome the transition.
Cool. All right, thanks.
Thanks, we appreciate it.
So, Mr. Vice Chair, we're into other business and public comment. Is there any public comment?
Yes, sir. Can you tell us who you are? I think really hold these at what, 3 minutes?
Yes, certainly. My name is Jamie Bassett. I'm from Chatham. I have a short statement. I'll try to make it less than 3 minutes.
He's tough, not me.
What's your full name, sir?
Jamie Bassett. Good afternoon, commissioners, Director McKiernan, and members of the DMF. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, for the opportunity to speak. I would like to briefly raise two important matters for your consideration, and in the interest of time, I will be as quick as possible. First, regarding biomedical dealer permits, I respectfully urge the Commission and the division to establish a clear and transparent application process for biomedical dealers. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration treats Limulus amebicide lysate as a regulated blood product with strict standards for purity, consistency, and reliability. Over 20 billion doses of vaccines and sterile injectable drugs per year are screened using LAL. The World Health Organization and global regulatory agencies mandate bacterial endotoxin testing for virtually every patient facing sterile product. This equates to billions of patients worldwide, spanning every country and healthcare system who depend on LAL for their safety. While the FDA strictly regulates LAL itself, at the state level, we currently have no comparable vetting process for biomedical dealers. Right now, anyone may qualify to be a biomedical dealer based on the bare minimum threshold of simply having a relationship with a processor. There are no qualification requirements, to our knowledge. I believe this is insufficient given the sensitivity of this field. A prospective biomedical dealer should demonstrate through a vetted application process that it has the required experience in horseshoe crab logistics, handling, welfare, infrastructure, standard operating procedures, financial resources, protocols, and safeguards in place before permits are granted. Such criteria would help ensure fairness, accountability, and the protection of both the industry and the resource. Second, with respect to footnote 9 of the DMF's March 13th, 2024 recommendation memo on bait quotas, I would ask the division to please reevaluate this matter as soon as possible
and bring it forth for public discussion if necessary. The survey underlying this methodology is nearly a decade old. Anchoring 2025 horseshoe crab resource allocations to a 10-year-old self-reported survey is methodologically tenuous for such an important resource. In 2023, the conch fishery had 47 active permits with 249,725 potholes. Using the DMF's own reference factor of 0.33 crabs per pothole, the actual bait need comes to 82,409 horseshoe crabs, not 140,000. Using a more realistic factor of 0.25 per pothole, the need is only 62,431. As of yesterday, the landings were at 91,000 crabs, exceeding the 2023 need. This indicates that the current quota does not align with actual demand. If only 82,000 crabs are needed for the 47 conch fishermen, why are trawler boats allowed to continue to take numbers of bait crab, horseshoe crabs out of the environment, and for what purpose? If the actual bait needs of the remaining conch fishermen may have already been met, where are the remaining horseshoe crabs going in the quota? A flexible quota system could adjust to genuine demand when genuine demand is actually demonstrated. When horseshoe crab bait is not needed, as seems to be the case trending now, the bait quota could be transferred into the biomedical fishery, which has been forced to run up against quota ceilings year after year now. The biomedical fishery, where crabs are not subjected to 100% mortality, but instead survive and contribute to national and global health security. If the DMF can administratively transfer unnecessary excessive bait quota into the biomedical fishery at certain points, according to its judgment, this season and following seasons, a lot more horseshoe crabs would survive. In closing, I respectfully request division review these two matters carefully, and that the commission consider placing them on a future agenda and perhaps advancing them to formal public comment. These issues affect fairness to fishermen, sustainability of the resource, and the integrity of global health safeguards. Thank you very much for your time and for your continued service.
Thank you.
Dan? Jamie, good to see you, good to hear from you. You bring up a lot of legitimate issues. And we're certainly, we've been reading your correspondence, and collectively we've said, yeah, we got to sit down this fall internally and try to figure some of these things out. You make an interesting point about the seasonal demand for whelk bait. And so with the whelk fisheries, we know that the whelk fishery is weakest during July and August and ramps up. And so I know that your company has obtained some crabs from the big quota and bled them, which we're all in favor of. But it has kind of placed, it has created this interesting dilemma of insufficient demand right now, that the demand may be greater later in the year. So how you guys conduct your business and how we regulate it, we're going to do our best to sort of like write rules that make economic and logistical sense, but at the same time trying to achieve those same conservation goals. So we'll do that. The only thing I'd say is as state director, really can't make rules that restricts the interstate trade of crabs, that the US Constitution kind of prevents that. Once it's sold, it can go into commerce. But having said that, I do have a concern. I don't necessarily want Massachusetts to be the bait source for other states that have like enacted moratoriums, for example. That it makes no sense. So we will take a look at that, and I think that a lot of the letters you've written to us are really well crafted, and I appreciate you being interested in coming forward, but also working with us. I know my staff works with you and the other company, almost daily. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Director.
Leo?
Nice to put a face with the letter that you wrote. It was an interesting letter indeed.
Thanks, sir.
How does how does one make a living on 25 cents a crab? When you, was that per a crab or per pound?
Per crab.
Okay,
So,
wait, let me get this straight. So a bait fisherman brings the crab to you
correct.
and you buy that crab from the fisherman. How much, not to get personal, but what was the price, the wholesale price that he was selling it to?
So bait fishery and the biomedical fishery have different
I'm
regulations.
talking about the bait.
Yes, and so we purchase both the bait crab and the biomedical crab for the same price because we treat them in the same way.
Okay.
The biomedical quota has a cap, which we run up against. And so last year last 2024, we purchased bait crab and we put them through the conservation efforts of the state through the rent crab program, which we were able to do. But I noticed that we were getting, we had a lot and the demand was virtually not there, even in the fall that I saw. And so this year, we participated a minimal amount in the bait fishery, and the sole purpose for that was to make sure that the one remaining hand harvester was able to work through his season. As you may have heard earlier, the hand harvesters have been, washed out of the system. And so there was one remaining hand harvester, and we wanted to make a commitment to that person to be able to earn a living and go from June 8th to essentially July 7th. So we purchased those crabs, still seeing no demand. I dropped the price. Normally these bait crabs go for anywhere from, I have an extensive experience in the bait industry for about 10 years now. They green crab as well and mussels. And normally a bait horseshoe crab will go for anywhere from $2.50 on the low end to a conch fisherman to $4 on the high end. I received a call from Delaware asking if I was interested in purchasing bait crabs for $4 a piece. The answer was no, but so we saw. So those are the prices. I saw that we needed to do something to move this small amount of rector crab product, and I put the price to prices that have never been seen before: 25 cents per horseshoe crab. We had one fisherman come in last week who purchased a number of crabs and saved himself $780 because so it's an opportunity for business-minded conch fishermen to take advantage of these lower prices. And as the director said, there may not be a demand right in June or July, and there could be a demand further on in the year. But still, if you're a business-minded person, you like most of the lobstermen I know, they plan ahead and they have their freezers and they stock up and they're able to save money. So that was the reason that we put it at 25 cents, which also benefited,
Point of order, I'm informed that we're not supposed to have discussion on public comment.
All right. So you know what?
Sorry about that.
We can stick around.
Sorry.
And if there's no other public comment, we can stick around. But anyway, we're gonna work on this. We appreciate your insights. And I know that the conservationists to your right also want us to do the right thing like that. So we'll figure this out. All right. Okay.
Sorry about that, Mr.
No, that's all right. Sure. Hey,
you can do anything you want on your last day on the commission.
Governor can fire me.
Commissioner comments, we're still allowed to do that?
Anyone has other business you can state it and we'll address it at a future meeting.
Yeah.
I've got, no one's stock assessment's been finalized, but we have it at the next available meeting after that, some kind of report on it.
Yeah, so,
Coming up, right?
yeah, so the lobster stock assessment is out to peer review right now. The peer review will be meeting the week of September 2nd through the 5th in Woods Hole. Those meetings are open to the public. If anyone's interested, if you need to come to Woods Hole, we're not going to be streaming it. The intention then is if we pass peer review, that the assessment will be reported to the board at the October ASMFC board meeting.
So it would be whatever, MFAC meeting after that. Yeah,
Our November meeting, yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, I can put together a summary presentation of that for the commission.
Yeah. Commissioner comments? Yes.
Yeah, just briefly, I'm gonna make my comment and then walk out the door because I'm going to this thing that the governor is hosting. But one of the reasons that I'm going is to, really recognize the work that DMF, Dan and the staff have been doing on really like looking at biodiversity as a part of their mission. I think most fishermen would say the best way to have sustainable fisheries is to have abundant fish. And I think that, DMF is working with the commissioner and staff thinking about shellfish and habitats and all sorts of other things around biodiversity. And so really just support that work that's going on and, whatever part we're playing in that. And I'm on my way to make sure to tell the governor the same thing.
Right? Bill?
Been a great summer so far. I've enjoyed my time on the water. I'm still fishing commercially, and I thank the state and the people who work with the DMF for doing a wonderful job at allowing me to continue to make my living. And I hope that in the future, my grandchildren will have the same opportunities. This is still the best state in the Northeast and perhaps in the country to be a commercial fisherman.
That's good to hear. Sophie, all set? Okay. Eric, all set? Leo.
You have about a half hour? Listen, it really truly, and sincerely, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve on the commission for 9 years, 3 terms. When I first came on, you and I are the last of the gang of 7. A little brief history. The commission was purged, I'll use the word, back in 2016. Two of those current members, Chairman Kane and Bill Adler, were the only 2 people who remained at that time. 7 new members were brought in. I was one of them. You're going to be the last of the Mohegans. And it's been really an honor to serve on this. And I've learned so much. Number one, the hard work that comes out of the division. I don't think you're going to see anything like that anywhere else. The hard work, the dedication, and the information they put out. My parting words will say, work hard for the commercial folks, work hard for the recreational folks. There's a balance that it's a resource that is meant for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Khalil. And we'll invite you to make the motion.
Bill, before, just one comment. What's in my head right now is when Dorothy was leaving Oz and she said the Tin Man and the Lion and the Scarecrow, and she said to the Scarecrow, "I'm gonna miss you the most." And I think collectively, I speak for the staff, we really did appreciate your 9 years on the commission because you were so engaged and you among all of us, all of your members, made the most calls, had the most questions, and really tried to understand the issue. And in some ways, you were like John Roberts, kind of taking votes, the old Supreme Court when it could swing either way. And we really do appreciate the work that you put in and your capacity and also your willingness to listen to some of the things that we're going to we try to bring forward as what we believe the facts, and you've been great. And we didn't even know you existed. Some of us knew, but I just met you for the first time because sometimes they come to us and they say, "Hey, you got anybody who'll serve on this commission? Because we got vacancies." And, you kind of came out of nowhere. You've been great. So thank you.
I learned quickly there are 2 sides of the story.
Yeah, that's amen.
Thank you.
All right.
I had motion, your last act. That way we get you in the minutes.
Move to adjourn the meeting.
We have a second?
Second.
Second by Sophie.
All
Right.
Thank you.
Maybe.